It's miraculous. I believe in magic. I live by magic. I'm a manifester like nobody is. And my husband to this day, he's like, oh yeah, she's, no doesn't work for Kim. And no doesn't work for me. I don't even know what no means. No means like I got to think about it in a different way.
Welcome to another episode of What It's Like to Be You. I'm Josh Levine, your host, and today my guest is Kim Jozwiak. Kim is a Type 7, self-pres social, 7 with a 6-wing, 712 trifix. And she's also a licensed clinical professional counselor who has certifications in EMDR therapy as well as internal family systems. And she also does equine therapy, works with horses. Kim reached out to me for this conversation because, in her words, she would like to shed light on the misconceptions of 7 as the extroverted, shallow, sort of dumb life of the party. I agree, that's a very useful misconception to shed light on, and I think Kim does a very good job with that. Her life story is one of the most extraordinary stories of resilience in the face of trauma that I think I've ever heard. She tells the story in detail. This is a long interview. It's probably I think it's the longest interview that I've ever released just about a person's Enneagram type. And I just couldn't bring myself to cut anything. It was just, everything was so rich in the way that she shared. And there's so much 7 energy in her sharing, in the pace of her telling, in the referential nature of her telling, and then there's this thing, and I have to tell you about this thing. And there's a way that Kim has had a resistance to being trapped, and a sense of running away from entrapments that she's had for her whole life, that I think is quite amazing. Her story and journey up to becoming a therapist is also quite amazing. I love meeting therapists that have rich journeys to becoming a therapist because they felt the calling based on their own personal lives. And Kim is certainly one of those people. Something interesting about Kim in particular is that there is a way that Kim has found herself in different moments of life, realizing that she has trapped herself, or that she has been stuck in an inner split where kind of she absorbed, this is maybe her 6-wing talking, kind of frames of how one should live a life that she then found herself kind of stuck in, that she then had to break out of. And I just find that interesting, being a core 7, that she still struggled with that. Typically we think of that as an attachment struggle, but turns out even triple hexad types can struggle with that too. And anyway, I just love Kim's energy and her her openness about sharing kind of like all of the critical moments in her journey where she had kind of ahas, and then the steps she took to confront herself and to get grounded. One other really important piece of this is that, as a mental type, we talk about kind of like the frothy mental energy that is like the shook up snow globe that we see in, well, it's the monkey mind. Everyone has this, but in particular in mental types, we see that, especially 6 and 7. And Kim's journey to discovering modalities that could help her settle the inner snow globe so that she could actually get to the substantive material psychologically that she needed to work through to get to the grounded place that she's now operating from. So I love this story. It's a story of redemption. It's a story of healing, and it's told in a very, very 7 way. Please note that this episode deals with themes like sexual trauma as well as drugs and alcohol addiction. So do with that what you will. And without further ado, I'm very excited for you to meet and learn from my new friend, Kim.
So yeah, like I just even noticing my body right now. So hands are starting to get a little sweaty.
Yeah.
Yeah. My extremities get affected when my anxiety shows up in that way. And I just am very familiar with my anxiety. Like it's been part of my life, my whole life. I didn't know it though. Like typical 7, right? It was kind of like, what is this? I don't know.
That's
I'm going to
pretty
run away from
interesting.
it. I'm going to run away from it. And actually I was a runner. I was a long distance runner. And as early as 7th grade, oh my God, that's young to be running long distance. But I was running long distance because I was running like somebody was after me, And at the same time, discovering what was out there through my running. And I loved it. I loved the high. I've always been a lover of highs. Oh my God, I've always been. Seriously, when I was little, I was that kid. I was that kid like spinning in circles. And I would like spin on those tire swings until I puked, and I'd do it again.
Wow, that's
And,
hilarious. It's
yeah, and my teachers love me, but they're like, "Can you please shut up and stop moving?"
uh-huh.
Because I was precocious. I was moving early. Like my mom tells me stories that like I learned to walk early. Like I was frustrated about it too. Typical frustration. I was like pissed that I couldn't move fast enough, and so and that's the story. Like she's like, "Oh yeah, you were moving as fast as you could away from us all the time." They actually literally had to put a latch on our front door because I figured out how to open the front door and I'd escape as early as like 3 years old. I'd be out in the cul-de-sac and they're like, Kimberly, what are you doing? Oh yeah. I can't even imagine.
There's so much here already. It's hilarious. So, okay, camera on, boom. We have the metaphor of running. We have
Yeah.
this anxiety that was showing up
Yeah.
in your palms,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think maybe a good way into this is I'm interested in what you said about not realizing that you were anxious, and
Yeah.
I've heard that from some mental types, the not relating to the
Yeah.
word anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, and I think in particular with the case of seven, it's kind of like that's not really where your attention is. Your attention is on the thing that you're escaping to or chasing or the fun
Yeah.
you're having or whatever. So can you talk
Yeah.
about,
Like,
yeah, just go ahead.
yeah, like that energy is a buzzing energy and it's very much like exhilaration. They're
Uh-huh.
very, very closely related in my body. And there's also a tenderness there too. And it always shows up like right here. And then of course in my extremities. And yeah, it's like this hyperness that like I used to talk really fast too. I remember people saying like, "Where are you from?" And we're all, Southern California. And I'm like, "Southern California? Why?" And they're like, "You talk fast." And I did. I was like, "Get the information out, let's go." Like I just wanted to get the information out. And then I don't know, it was just everything was urgent for me. And sometimes that is also a symptom of trauma.
Okay. Yeah.
Like a sense of urgency is that overwhelm. And I figured out how to deal with overwhelm pretty early. Like
Hmm.
just get moving, get things going. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's occurring to me in the moment is there's this incredible book that I recommend to everyone called How Emotions Are Made, and it's by a neuroscientist
Ooh,
named Lisa Feldman Barrett. And the punchline is that an emotion is not a preordained physiological fingerprint that
mhm,
has like a particular label. It's not like your heart's beating
mhm,
fast in this whatever, and that means you're angry.
right.
An emotion is a interpretation of a physiological state depending on your context and your what she calls a goal. Anyway, it's a whole thing. But
Mm,
as a mental type, seven has this extraordinary way of framing anything um,
yeah.
to what to serve a certain sense of keeping them uplifted and stimulated and excited, and to experience a physiological state of arousal and then to
Yeah.
claim that that's anxiety would be sort of counter
Yes.
to the seven way of framing things. And
Yes.
so it makes sense to me what you're
Absolutely.
saying about why seven
Yeah.
is why you didn't relate to even the word anxiety, but you would rather, or your words were exhilaration or whatever else you would use. So
And it
yeah,
also, I think you bring up that is beautifully said, and I can't wait to read that book. But also, in my family of origin, anxiety and anger were not valid expressions. Because if I
okay,
was anxious, then that would cue my mother to say, "Be anxious for nothing." She'd start spouting verses to me, and then she'd say, "You need to trust in the Lord." And
okay,
so there was never any like, "What? You're anxious? What's going on, sweetie?" Right? There was never any inquiry into the anxiety. In fact, like part of my story, and we'll go into it, is
yeah,
there something horrific happened to me at an early age and nobody noticed. And I actually have pictures before and after. I am noticeably different. I mean, I
okay,
was this cute, bouncy, like long hair. And at some point, I cut my own hair and it was like I cut it off. Like all of a sudden I got, and that's actually for a young one to do that, that's telling. And then I started cutting my sister's hair too. So, and then I cut all the Barbie's hairs. Like something was going on with me and I kept getting in trouble for that behavior. But it was just a reaction to this horrific thing that happened to me. And so, like, I believe I was born with this kind of 7 way of seeing the world,
Yeah.
but it's like our family systems heighten those abilities to survive our stuff.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, like it, I'm back. It's taken me a long time. It took me a long time to go to therapy
Yeah.
because in my family of origin, that wasn't a thing. Like you just don't do that. And so I didn't really have any context or paradigm.
Right.
And then I met some people, and those people, one was a therapist and she became my friend. And then she normalized it for me.
Wow.
And then the other
Okay.
one was in therapy and she normalized it for me. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. So it's like we carry biology, we carry environment. And then like, so I think the rest of our adulthood, some of us kind of want to figure that out because we're not living our best lives, you know?
Yeah. Since it's here in the air, are you willing to share your story and what happened and how you ended up processing it? And just to set a frame too is, you know, it's relatively recent that you have become a therapist. I mean, well, recent, I mean, within the last decade.
Yes.
And, you know, and what you're just about to describe happened very early. And so there's been really this lifelong journey of, well, I'll let you give words to that. So,
yeah, thank you. And I'm just checking within.
Yeah.
And I got consent yesterday.
Okay.
Because after I told you I would talk about it and it'd be okay, I had some parts going, you never talked to us about that. And I'm like, shit.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so I did a journal entry yesterday about that and really talked to that little girl because she and I have done a lot of work together with this, with an attachment oriented therapist. He really helped me with some early attachment wounds. And so what she told me and what she reminded me is that we created something from that. Like we transmuted that experience into this collage. And I call her the angel of death. And this little girl loves this collage. She's like, it really helped her like go, yeah, I'm badass and don't fuck with me. And so I'm an eldest of 5. And
actually,
all
before
of
you
us,
do, I just want to make sure, I just want to really double check. Is it okay to talk about it?
yes, it is.
It is. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got her permission. I actually have the angel of death looking at me right now. So, because she wanted that, she goes, put that angel of death up. I'm like, okay, I will.
Right.
Okay. And maybe I'll show it. I don't know if we can share stuff on this, but
yeah, of course. Yeah. If you want to show it on the screen, you can do that.
I will. I'll show it after this little bit. So when I'm an eldest of 5 kids, and we're all really close in age. And we were in an old-fashioned family where mom stayed home. Dad was a pastor and very involved with church. He was gone all the time. I mean, he was either helping parishioners, being with parishioners, studying for whatever he was doing. And so it was mom. Mom had had a severe brain injury a year before she got pregnant with me. And it was so bad that they said that she would probably never learn to walk and talk again. And she did. And she remembered things, like finally remembered things. She had lost her memory. She was in a coma. She literally got propelled out of a car and hit the pavement with her frontal lobe.
Wow.
And so the family says she wasn't quite right after that, but nobody really knew enough about what that would mean. And so before the accident, very competent secretary. She went to school for it. She was competent. She kept books. She was a bookkeeper. After the accident, had a very hard time managing her emotions. So she gets pregnant with me. I come 6 weeks early in the middle of a potluck, church potluck, which that makes sense because I love potlucks. And I do.
Okay.
It's like, it's a seven's dream. Like, what are you going to bring to eat?
Self-pres 7
Oh
right
my,
there. Yeah.
oh, press
Okay.
seven. It's all about the food. Oh,
Uh,
and we can go into that too. I'm actually a
okay.
practicing vegan. But anyway,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
so, so I get born into this family. She's still in recovery from a major brain trauma. Like her hair actually in pictures, she's still wearing a wig because they had to shave her whole head because her
Hmm.
brain swelled, and they had to release it. So my sister is born 15 months later, and then my next brother is born 2 years after that, and then another brother, another 2 years, and then another brother. So by the time I'm 6 years old, and I've kind of figured out when this happened for me, we would go to my grandparents' house, and my mom and dad would get away a little bit, but this was during the time my second to youngest brother was born. And when he was born, us girls stayed with my grandparents, and my other two brothers stayed with somebody else.
Hmm.
And we would play hide and go seek with my grandfather.
Hmm.
Though this is like a choppy memory, and a lot of times early memories like this, especially when you're like 5 and 6 years old, they're mostly body memories and emotional memories.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I have had kind of a chronic nightmare of being trapped with a Mexican man looking at me.
Hmm.
My grandfather's Mexican, 100%. So is grandma. My
Hmm.
mother is 100% Mexican.
Hmm.
And um, and I have this sense that I'm being suffocated
Hmm.
and I'm going to die. And I just always would like, I would have this nightmare, and then I brush it off. I'm like, oh, I got to stop watching those crazy movies.
Hmm.
And I was also attracted to that kind of stuff. I mean, violent movies, horror book, like Stephen King fan,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the more, I'm like, right now I'm watching True Blood, like again, because there is
Yeah.
something in me, I think at an early age that had a direct contact with pure evil,
Yeah.
and I was molested.
Hmm.
So my grandfather had gotten me, I had hidden in a closet, and I had been separated from my sister and my cousin, and um, he he molested me.
Yeah.
Um, and but I do believe it was only that one time, because I do have memories of never going back into that part of the house again,
Hmm.
and I'd only go outside. I would never go inside. In fact, they sometimes couldn't get me to come inside. And there was a story about that.
Right.
And I was this adorable, adorable girl. I mean, I was
Hmm.
like fanciful. I pretended. I was always pretending. After that, the story goes that I started like getting in trouble, not paying attention. I don't remember any of the first grade. I don't
Hmm.
remember even the move. Like we moved between first grade and second grade. Don't remember that. Like
Yeah.
I don't remember my teacher. I just don't. And then these school pictures, like there's this cute, adorable picture of me. I have really long hair. I'm holding a stuffed animal. The next picture is I've lost a couple of teeth because it's that age. My hair is a mess. I'm like, I've had chopped it up. My mom had, I kind of remember this. I got in trouble for it. My
Yeah.
mom had taken me to a hairdresser to try to fix it.
Hmm.
And from then on, I was really afraid of people,
Yeah.
and afraid of my grandfather. But at that
Right.
time, I think I kind of stuffed it away somewhere, which we do as children,
Right. Right.
and I blame myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meaning, I think children do this. We kind of like, the only process we have is I must have done something to deserve that,
Right. Right.
but I hid that away too,
Hmm.
and so you know really gave birth to my incredible social anxiety, like terrible. And people, I wasn't shy. I was actually quite precocious and almost too quick to trust. It
Yeah.
was kind of an opposite. Like during my middle school years, I found myself in situations where I had no business being in, but it's almost like because I had to put that away, like I lost my ability to discern safe situations,
Right.
and I would chronically get myself into like situations with older men, with when I started drinking with just boys and guys, and really like had no ability to have boundaries and felt shame about it. Felt like I was a terrible person because I allowed it. And it was
Yeah.
just like, oh, Kim, poor Kim, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Gosh. I'm just taking that in and I'm taking a breath
yeah.
to be with it. Um, and thanks for being willing to share it.
Yeah.
Just typologically speaking, what's coming up for me is that so you have that 6 wing and also 1 and 2 fixes, which are pretty hard on yourself, And so even though you've
Yes.
got core 7, which is permissive and reframing and things like that, there's a lot
Yeah.
typologically in you that can kind of crack down on your inner system.
Oh,
Um,
that's a
and
great word for it. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and the other thing too is yeah, because they're all 3 superego types.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that, like with attachment theory, my understanding is when you have an experience like that where the figures that are supposed to be safe for you are also dangerous, it creates
Yes.
disorganized attachment, right? So it's
It
like
does. Yes.
how you don't know what to do because the people
Yeah.
that you're running to for
Right.
safety are dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what do you do with that as a kid?
Absolutely. And neglectful. My mom actually
Right.
was quite neglectful. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think she was in her right mind most of the time. And
Mm-hmm.
so, us kids, we were like a wild pack of dogs. Seriously, when we were set out into the neighborhood, I think neighbors complained about us
Mm-hmm.
because we would just be out there till evening. My mom would finally call us in when my dad got home. And there was a lot of fun, like a lot of laughter, a lot of playing, but also a lot of like, I did a lot of withdrawal. Like my introversion showed up with more like, I just want to read a book. I would rather read a book than be with people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I also learned to read really early.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I was reading like novels like Bambi, the full novel, and I was like 8. I was young and I was dealing with this, and there was something within me that was like, yes, the heartbreak of Bambi losing his mom, right? And the strong father figure of Bambi's dad. It's like that was my dad. My
Mm-hmm.
dad to me at that time was my rescuer.
Mm-hmm.
So with him, I always knew kind of what I was dealing with. And he was kind, but he was very rigid in his thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like Marine Corps trained. He spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, and then he was a pastor. And like it was all about excellence. We do things with excellence. I told you what to do. Please don't make me repeat myself. There's going to be a consequence to the behavior. So I was always working to go, yeah, I want to get in line with dad. Mom was more, and I think she's a 9. She would just kind of shift all over the place, and she would really get absorbed with my dad, like she was completely enmeshed with my dad. And so whatever my dad said, my mom did. And then whatever the context was, the way she understood it, like she's still today like really absorbed with the concept of Jesus as her friend. And
Mm-hmm.
so and then she lives out this really kind of weird, I think it's weird way of being Jesus's friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I'm with her for periods of time, she'll absorb into me. She'll like start to like she'll like, what are you going to eat? And I used to get furious about that. Oh my God, so furious. But I've done a lot of work around my mom too. Like
The repulsion of someone merging into you. Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
yes. Oh my God. And I don't know if that's a 7 thing, but like I cannot stand that. My sister is even worse. And she's actually a 9. She's
Mm-hmm.
like I think she's a Bermuda. I think she's an obvious Bermuda, but she's so like my mom. I think it's really hard for her.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
So I'm thinking about you as a young kid around maybe 7 or 8 after this whole
Yeah.
event happened, and after you
Yeah.
started getting into trouble, you were cutting your hair,
Yeah.
you're reading things like Bambi, and you're a 7 and a mental type. And when you were talking about your fascination with like true crime or these kinds of things,
Yeah.
I had the thought it was kind of like a counter-phobic mental response, like an unconscious
Yeah.
counter-phobic response to
Yes.
just be near that psychological material that you knew unconsciously was there that needs to be processed.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and the kind of
yeah.
friends I attracted, I'm
Hmm.
telling you, I attracted all like people on the margins.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like my best friend, her father was schizophrenic.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
she was really messed up. And my parents would let me go to her house, and the mom was like a practicing witch. And I
Okay.
mean, it was the first time I got like, it was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like the kind of people that I just didn't have filters or things. And so, and I think you're right. I think there was a kind of energy there. And I know she was molested. She actually told me, and I didn't know what to do with it. We were like in the fifth or
Hmm.
sixth grade. And I'm like,
Okay.
oh, let's put that somewhere else. Do you want to go to church with me? Like, that's all I knew, you know? And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then even later on, like somebody called me when we were in middle school, they were doing, remember when they did the student body stuff and I was running for some sort of student body thing. And they're like, yeah, you're like the president of the misfits. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I think you're right. Because I would hang out with all the ones that were just kind of probably neurodivergent too. Now that I look
Uh-huh.
back, like, and I might have a little bit of that. I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I have all the symptoms. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, it's like that kind of experience and just being in that kind of environment that's kind of minimizing, doesn't deal with things. It's a little fanciful. My mom's kind of fanciful. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's like it produced in me this desire to read and get into story and who done it and will they find the killer, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, isn't that a cry from like I wanted somebody
Yeah.
to
From
know.
somewhere deep in you. Yeah. About that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please, somebody find that person that killed me,
Yeah. And
you
also just
know?
being in the environment where, um, your genuine emotions are reframed from a religious point of view, and that's just
Yes,
what your environment is giving.
yes.
So, so what happened? How what and take us through the journey of how you eventually
Yeah.
kind of started to
So
confront and process
yeah,
this.
so we moved several times, and then in middle school, in the seventh grade, I was beaten up terribly.
Hmm.
One of my friends was in a fight. I walked into the fight. My friend was already like 5'8", and we're in the seventh grade. I was a little
Hmm.
thing. I walked in, I'm like, you don't hurt my friend like that. And that girl turned on me and pummeled me. And she like bashed my head against the cement. And so I stumbled home. My mother can't even handle it. She kind of like she loses it.
Right.
And I don't remember a lot of it. But what I do remember is there was a decision made to get out of Anaheim, California because it was turning too scary for my parents.
Okay.
And so my dad had this dream of moving to rural Arizona,
Hmm.
and we would camp there at times, and it was like near Sedona, beautiful. I was kind of upset because I was just starting to make friends, not the greatest friends. I mean, they were all smoking pot. I wasn't quite yet, but I was already interested. And they're like, "Yeah, you got this happened to you. We've got seen other things. We really want a more protective space." So I think my parents kind of like drew in the wagons, right? And so we all moved to rural Arizona. Like there's nothing around. Like we literally live in two trailers for 3 months while my dad and his friend build our house. And it was crazy. Like I didn't know what to do with that. So I would go off on long walks with our German Shepherd, and I met some kids in the area who, of course, were all doing drugs and drinking. What do you do in those areas with that? So literally, my parents weren't, I wonder if neither parent was self-pres because they just didn't think things through. And like, listen to, well, this is part of the story. I think my dad was self-pres blind. So he was like a dreamer, always doing things. He left the ministry. He started like a car dealership. He loved cars, boy from Detroit. And so he starts this car corral, he calls it, in Cottonwood, Arizona, and can't get anyone to buy the cars. So he has to drive from there to Orange County, California to buy and sell cars. So again, dad's gone a lot, and we're like running around trying to figure it out. We build the house. I get a horse, which is I'm like obsessed. I'm like so excited. I get a
Yeah.
horse. I get to, be with that horse. I also meet all the kids in the area. They're all partying it up. I'm introduced to pot. I'm 14. I'm introduced to pot. I'm introduced to alcohol. I'm like, oh my God, I love this stuff. I loved it. It was like an instant love affair. I'm like, oh my God, the chatter quieted down.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
No more
Yeah.
anxiety. All of a sudden, I was cute and funny, and everybody loved me. Like, who
Right.
doesn't love that?
Yeah.
But the weird thing that happened the second time like I was out with friends at a party, somebody slipped something in one of my beers,
Oh gosh. Yeah.
and I was blacked out.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I remember is I woke up naked next to an 18-year-old, and my friends gathered me, but that opened up something inside of me that I couldn't stop. And so all of a sudden this pattern would we go out drinking, I turned into the easy girl. Like everybody knew that they could, they
Oh
could fuck
wow.
me
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And and it was like there was such a split already, I think, in my personality, that there was that girl who
Yep.
was full of self-loathing and shame. And the other girl who was like daddy's little girl, so good, go to church, lead the little kids at Sunday school. And those two started getting farther and farther. And then my dad's cancer came back. So he was diagnosed with cancer right before we left for Arizona.
Wow. Okay.
His
Yeah.
cancer comes back, and in 3 months, he's dead. He
Oh my
literally,
gosh.
the cancer
Okay.
metastasizes. We watch him disappear before our very eyes. And the rule of the household is this: we will have faith and we will believe that daddy's going to be healed. So my mom's like, you do not talk about it. We didn't prepare for his death. We were like all told we couldn't do that because that would give the devil some sort of, I don't know. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so it was horrific. It was like, then my dad dies and we're not prepared for it. Our whole family's not even financially prepared for it.
Right.
And so I think my mom too, I think she's self-pres blind. I think both of those people are. And so my dad dies and I find out this way. So my dad is starting to get sicker and sicker, and now he's on a morphine drip, and he's seeing angels and singing to angels at the hospital, and my grandparents come in, and we're still not allowed to talk about it. And we all go there one night and he's gone. He's kind of gone in his mind, like he's
Okay.
no
Right.
longer conscious.
Yeah.
I go to school the next day, which
Mm-hmm.
is fucked up, but I do. And I go to school the next day and I'm kind of out of my mind. I'm like, don't know what to do with it.
How
And I'm
old are you
just like,
at this point?
I had 14.
Yeah.
So
14.
this is
Okay.
after like all the things too.
Right.
Like
Right.
all this
Yeah.
stuff happens,
Right.
and then I'm 14 here. I'm almost 15 by this point. It's in March. And I call the hospital, the nurse answers, and she's like, oh, honey, hold on a second. And I already know. My mom gets on the phone
Yeah.
and she's like, weirdly, your dad's with Jesus now.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
not even crying.
Mm-hmm.
And they come and get me. I'm a mess. And they're like, just trust in the Lord, Kimmy, just trust in the Lord. And then like that whole thing happens. So our world is blown up. We have no money. Like my dad was really irresponsible with money. And so we lose everything. We go bankrupt. My mom gets her family to help us. It's like this grand adventure in her mind. I'm smoking more pot than I need. I mean, I just can't be there. I can't. And so I'm smoking weed as much as I possibly can. And within 4 months, we moved back to California. And my mom, this is kind of funny though. I just love it. I'm 7. See, I can laugh at stuff like this. But so our first house we rent, and it's in a primarily Black neighborhood, Black school. It's 80% Black. It's in LA. And that was an interesting experience. And I'm kind of glad I got that experience because I guess this is probably what Black people feel like when they go to all white schools. But I'm like this little cute girl. I'm going through my preppy stage. Remember, I don't know, back in the 80s, like I'm wearing my little alligator shirt that we found at like a thrift store because we had no money. So we
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
would buy stuff at thrift stores. And
Yeah.
I'm like just this little preppy girl, really cute, kind of hiding. Like I would a lot of people were like, Kim, what is going on? Why are you hiding? But I would be sitting like this, usually reading something. And the boys from the basketball team and the football team, I was in classes with them. They would pick on me, try to get a rise out of me. And I was just like overwhelmed. But I didn't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody ever knew. I was so unable to speak of anything because
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I'm gonna have to wear
Right.
another layer or something. Why are people noticing me? That last thing I wanted were people to notice me.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
and so I got found a group of kids there. We just got high all the time. There were a couple of Mormons that I completely corrupted. It was awesome. But I was like, come on, we'll have fun. You
Uh,
try. You're gonna
yeah. Yeah.
love this. And so yeah, and then we moved into another home finally, but it was a wreck. My mom couldn't afford to fix it, had to get a help with the loan, and it was falling apart. We were on food stamps. We could barely make ends meet. My mom couldn't hold a job, but nobody knew why.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was her brain injury. I just don't think she had no critical thinking, none.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I started getting aware of like the way she was raising my siblings, and I would get mad at her and have conversations with her. I'm like, you are
Okay.
not doing it the right way. And my
Uh-huh.
little one
Yeah, the
one
one fix there. Yeah.
energy
Little
was coming
seven
out,
one. Yeah, yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
she's like, you don't get to tell me what to do, sweetie.
Mm-hmm.
And then one
Mm-hmm.
time I told her to fuck off, and that's the first time she ever slapped me across the face.
Mm-hmm.
She would just disappear in her room and pray. And if there
Yeah.
was a problem, she's like, let me pray for you. And then she'd pray tongues. She'd speak tongues over us. It was
Uh-huh.
so bizarre because we
Mm-hmm.
grew up in a charismatic, also a
Right, right.
charismatic
Like
household. And
tradition. Yeah.
so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so she'd
Yeah.
have like visions. Honey, Jesus is really sad that you're doing things. And I'm like, oh my God, please
Wow.
stop. And
Right.
so, but I didn't have the capacity at that time to make sense of it. I just would just go get high, go get high, go get high,
Yeah. Right, right.
you know? And so I met like these group of kids that's what we all did. And so this was like sophomore, junior, senior year. And then between junior and senior year, all my friends had gotten kicked out and were going to the alternative school because at a certain point they were all found with possession. I never was caught because I was an expert at not getting caught because I'm a 7. You're not going to trap me.
Uh-huh.
I'm telling you, it's one of my superpowers. And
I
it was
believe you.
like,
Yeah.
people never thought I was like, they're like, I'm so glad you're hanging out with Kim. She's such a good
That's
influence.
right.
And I'm like, here you go.
Uh,
Shh. I knew all the ways to get away with it. Totally. All the ways.
yeah.
And they're like, we want them to hang around Kim. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get them into pot, I'm like smoking, drinking. I know who to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Let me
Mm-hmm.
hook you up. And your parents will never know.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was crazy. But then in my junior year,
Just real quick about
after,
that. Just
yeah,
on the 7 thing. It's interesting to me
yeah,
how, you know, it's like what I hear from most sevens is that they have a pretty clear sense of just what they want, and
oh, yeah,
what you're wanting, and it makes sense that this is what you're wanting is to hang out with these kids and to sort of obliterate yourself with
yes,
marijuana and alcohol and stuff like
yes,
that, and just to
yes,
help quiet the mind. And
yes,
there's an amazing book by Gabor Mate
yes,
called "In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts," which is about
yes. I'm
addiction. And
familiar with it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and yeah,
yeah,
one of his main points is about it's not about the addiction isn't the problem, it's what is the addiction trying to solve, and what do you actually
yeah,
get out of the experience. Anyway, so there you are, young 7, wanting to do
yeah,
these things, and
yeah.
this kind of like 7 mentality of knowing how to get away with it,
Oh,
knowing how to
oh, yeah,
create the circumstances so that you can do what you
oh, yeah.
want.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, it was brilliant. Like, I got away with everything. I got my
Yeah.
own car. I actually drove myself to get a driver's license. I was already driving by the time I was
That's
15.
okay. uh
I was taking the car out at nighttime. My mom would be asleep, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
would go take our orange Volkswagen bus with a white top. I learned how to do stick shift in that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would roll it down the street with all my friends. We called it the party van. We'd all jump in.
Mm-hmm.
turn on the tunes. I was a big headbanger, loved the Scorpions, Def Leppard. I was like, we were
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
rocking and rolling. We'd drive all the way down to Huntington Beach. We'd sit around. One time, oh my God, I lost my keys in the sand. And it was like 3 a.m. I'm like, no, no, no,
Uh-huh.
no. No, 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 this can't be happening. And so everyone's like, no, no, Kim has to get home. Because I was like the only one that was responsible. I'd already had a job at this point.
Yeah.
I was the
Yeah.
only one with cash because I was not going to be trapped. Like I was really, even by then, I'm like, I will not be trapped by not having enough money. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
went down to the Bob's Big Boy. I became a hostess, then a waitress. And I just
Wow,
was
so,
like, I loved
mhm.
having the cash, right? So I was the one that would, and then we found the keys, thank God. And my mom did not know what was going on until one night I was too drunk to come home. And I think I had alcohol poisoning. We had
Okay.
all been sitting in a hot tub drinking vodka straight out of the bottle. And I kind of remember some of it, but they couldn't get me off the couch. Like I had
Oh.
collapsed and I was like mumbling. My mom comes and gets me. My mom's little. She's this little Mexican lady. And I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think at this point we're probably the same height. And I do remember her telling me about this. She goes, Kim, I never heard such language. That's all she cared about. And that
Okay.
I was using the Lord's name in vain. And
Uh-huh.
so
Uh-huh.
and so she just kind of
Okay.
deposited me like in my sister's bed because my sister was on the first floor. And I do
Yeah.
remember waking up and I'm still in my wet bathing suit. My
Mm.
whole body is like a prune.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so sick. And my mom doesn't really do much about it. She's
Mm-hmm.
just like, what? Like she was so, I think she was probably suffering from pretty severe depression too.
Okay.
And just under an overwhelm, like here she is, 5 kids, no husband, but
Yeah.
it was crazy. And so that was my life. I was just for a couple of years there until I went. So I'm waitressing at Bob's Big Boy, and this elderly couple would come in and they'd never leave much of a tip, and everybody hated waiting on them. But I would because they were really cute and they reminded me of my grandparents. But they'd always leave us these tracts. And back in the 80s and 90s, there were these little pieces of paper that would have like the story of Jesus. And mostly it would be like, be saved or go to hell. I mean, it was really, and there was like these graphic pictures, like a demon and Jesus, choose
Uh-huh.
Jesus. And
Uh-huh.
so they'd always leave me a tract. So this one day, and I always had them fooled. I was like, oh, thank you. That's so sweet. I love your necklace. Where did you, I was already like really charming and because hopefully to get more tips. And they're like, Kim, we the Lord is telling us something for you. I'm like, really? What is the Lord saying? And they're like, you're supposed to go to the Billy Graham Crusade. I'm like, I am? All right. And this is my like, I don't know what that is, but I don't know, it kind of sounded like fun. So
Okay.
I get me and my friends, we go down to the Angel Stadium and we're as high as a kite, sit up in the bleachers and watch this man preach. Something shifts inside of me.
Okay.
There's something that happens. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? I don't
Okay.
know. It was almost
Yeah.
like I had an out of body experience.
Yeah.
There was something that was happening down on that field that I was both attracted to
Mm-hmm.
and scared of.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to come back tomorrow. I came back the next night by myself,
Mm-hmm.
walked down to the field
Mm-hmm.
and just like did the whole like the evangelistic thing, accept the
Mm-hmm.
Lord Jesus Christ as my personal savior.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I did. And I felt something. There was
Was it
something
sincere
like,
or was it kind of a like
no,
a
the fear
morbid
went away.
fascination? Okay. I see. Yeah.
It was a fascination and almost like a clarity in a moment. It was as if something stilled inside of me.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, and I knew all the things. I'd grown up very religious. And so in sudden fashion, I became a Jesus freak.
Mm.
Like in a day, stopped hanging out with those friends, stopped drinking and smoking, started going to church, started all of it,
Whoa.
leading Bible studies on the campus, getting involved with the whole Christian punk movement and the Christian headbanger movement. and
Okay.
like gave up all my worldly music. And that lasted for about 2 years. And then because I'm antsy as, I graduate high school. I don't know what I want to do. I'm in this really weird relationship with this guy that's starting to stalk me. And so I decide I'm going to go to Bible school. So I go to Bible school in the mountains for a semester,
Wait, real
mostly
quick though,
to,
real quick on that.
yeah,
So on this moment of awakening, it
yeah,
feels, I'm using that word in a very
it
particular
is an
way, but
awakening.
yeah,
It's a first moment of awakening
yeah,
that, I see this at like as we're growing in life, we have these moments of clarity. Now, I think a lot of times, especially when we're young, they kind of close back up a bit,
hmm.
but there's some sort of neural pathway that's starting to be
I was
like
just thinking, yeah,
activated.
your way
Mhm.
using your hands. I was thinking about some
Yeah,
channel opened up in you,
some channel opened
some.
up. There was some longing, like longing for, and maybe this is where I go in my one too. I mean, I've got a lot of, you're right, super ego energy. I wanted this direct, unblocked access to the divine. And so I felt it all of a sudden, like I felt like I was in the divine, whatever
Okay,
that was. And it felt like pure love and acceptance. And it
and
was like
and
that.
that actually touched you, and you were aware of it in that language at that time when you were around
No,
17. Okay, okay,
no. That's the language I give it today. I think at the
okay, yeah,
time I thought it was, Jesus, just
right, okay.
Jesus coming in. And I would have these visuals of like Jesus, just me sitting at the feet of Jesus and
Did you
me,
feel at the time like you, because what I'm fascinated by this is that you had lived in this environment
yeah,
that was essentially gaslighting your experience. Like
yes,
you had very intense and severe trauma, like acute
yes,
moments of trauma. And I'm thinking
yes,
like not just, I mean, yes, it started with the thing with your grandfather, but then there was the
yeah,
time at 14 waking up blacked out next to an 18-year-old, and then your
yeah,
dad dying,
yeah,
and then all the drugs and alcohol you're pumping into your system, and then the
right,
way your mom is being sort of dissociated, taking comfort in a religious fantasy, and
yes,
nobody actually meeting you, and so you sort of having
no,
to take care of yourself in this way by
yeah,
um, play acting this role
yeah,
of the perfect little Christian girl.
yes,
And then um, all of a sudden having a sincere religious awakening that makes the play acting no longer a play act and actually something that comes
right,
from a real place in you. And that is like
absolutely.
a really radical shift.
It was, and it was very body centered.
Yeah.
There
Okay.
was no
Yeah.
longer just ideas, and I still
Yeah.
remember it. I
Yeah.
was on the grass. I could smell the grass because we were on the baseball field. And I remember the bright lights. And I remember the woman. She was probably middle age, and she had so much just kindness in her. Like she was really listening to me. Like she cued into me.
There you go. Yeah. Like
And
a heart
I
centered
had
thing
not,
too.
I don't
Yeah.
think, yeah,
Like
I think
real
it was a very
attunement.
hard,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
real attunement. And I don't think I had had that
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
long, long time.
Sounds like it.
And
Right.
so something about that drew me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I quickly went back into mentalization because I mean, that's what
Sure.
you do, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I started becoming really attracted to like scholarly interpretations of the Bible.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
like, what does it mean? What's the cultural context? Don't take things out of context. I never did get into the whole witnessing evangelical. I was too introverted for that. And I just felt like, why would I ever want to do that to a person? To me, that felt like entrapment. Even then, I didn't have the words for it. I'm like, I'm not going to entrap anybody. I mean, around this time, my mom actually went to a Kiss concert and stood outside a Kiss concert with her friends, witnessing. Oh my goodness, it was crazy. It was
Okay.
crazy. It was like Southern California, headbanger, headbanger. Like our youth group ministers were both long-haired headbangers. The kids that come in are tatted up, like real extreme stories of alcohol and drugs, found Jesus. Now we're singing like Striper songs. And I mean, I still haven't seen it. My daughter wants me to, but I think there's that movie called Saved. That's my era.
Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
in the 80s, we're all just kind of like high on the emotional. Well, I think a lot of us were from really messed up families, like broken, like that was the age of like latchkey kids for the first time. Parents
Okay.
were
Yeah. Yeah.
working or divorced, or in our case, single parent. And there were a lot of that. And so we were all kind of gathered together trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I was a leader. I've always had kind of a leadership. I'm an eldest. I'm a seven. I mean, we have a lot of assertive energy.
Yeah.
So
Kind
I
of
have a
like Pied
lot of
Piper quality. Yeah.
totally. I had a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
followers. And
Uh-huh.
tell you the truth, what's weird about this is because I was so disconnected to people, I actually wasn't connected. I don't remember a lot of those people.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so when
Yeah.
Facebook came around, I had people finding me, and I'd have to talk to my sister, who was the connected. She's a 9, but she's very observant. And she kind of is well, she didn't do as much drugs as me either, but she really remembered everything. She's like, yeah, that's those people. And that's that person that you did this with. And I was the one that would sit with the outcast out of our circle. Like we had a boy that wasn't taking showers, and the ministers were like, Kim, can you go tell him to take a shower? I'm like, I am not going to tell him to take a shower, but I will sit with him and see what's going on. And I remember listening to his story and just kind of looking around his house and seeing it was in disrepair. And I think he had alcoholic parents, and just remembering, just knowing, like I had a real sense that, we all I don't know. I saw a lot of like marginalization growing up.
Yeah.
We didn't grow up in a nice area, and so I think I took that with me. And then later on, I heard from him on Facebook, and he goes, Kim, you saved my life. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, I was gay and my parents were alcoholics, and I had all this trauma, and you just listened to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it brought me to tears. I'm like, at least I did something good there.
Yeah.
It's like, and I don't know. I think I've always had that with me.
Yeah. It
And I
sounds
think
like
I
it.
got
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
from my parents too.
Yeah.
My dad would sit for long. We would have people over all the time for dinner. We'd hear the stories. And my parents were very much about serving people. And so, yeah.
But
So I think that's a little bit.
But just so I'm clear, that was an example of a person that you had this huge impact on, but it
Yeah.
like the memory was foggy or almost
I
non-existent, right?
hardly remember
You
it.
don't remember it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
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 And it makes sense given everything that was
Yeah.
happening in your life. Yeah.
Yeah. So like there I am at 18 and then 19, I'm out of high school. I'm really antsy. I want to move somewhere. My friend wants to move somewhere. And she and I literally get a map out. I'm like, where should we go? Like, it's so boring here. She goes, I don't know, Seattle might be cool. I'm like, yeah, it rains all the time. She goes, I have family in Chicago. I'm like, Chicago? That sounds interesting. Let's do it. And that's how we decided. We both like worked 2 jobs, waitressing jobs, and got all this cash together. We packed my little Volkswagen Bug with all our belongings in 2 black garbage bags in the front, because that's how they were. My car broke down before we even hit the border. The starter broke. We didn't turn around. We're like, we'll just push start it all the way. So push started the car all the way to Chicago. It was a blast.
It sounds like it.
We had I blew a tire. And this trucker stops, and we're both kind of like, oh God, here we go. We're going to die right now. Big gruff old guy. He comes out and he's like, what the hell are you 2 doing out here? If I wasn't a man of honor, I could kill you 2. I could do worse. And we're like, oh. He's like, but come on, we're going to get your car fixed. And he does. We get the car fixed, spend the cash we have.
Yeah.
We come to Chicago, and I'm like, this is amazing. We moved there in like September. The colors are changing. It's a city. It's so diverse, so different than Southern California. And yeah, then I ended
Uh-huh.
up never moving again. I mean, I ended up staying there, for many reasons. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Are you still
that's
in
just
Chicago
kind of
now?
where my energy went. Yeah, I'm in
Yeah,
the
you're
northwest suburbs.
yeah.
If
Okay.
I could have moved, I would have, but I was broke. And
Okay.
that first February, I'm like, what the hell is this? I
Hmm.
thought I knew cold, but I didn't know cold.
Hmm.
And I wasn't prepared for it, even though I'm a self-pres, but I didn't have any money. So I was
Yeah.
just like, I went to the Army surplus store and got a wool coat. And we lived down on Belmont and Sheffield, which is a real punk area.
Yeah.
And so just kind of, and fell into drugs and alcohol like almost immediately. Like
Yeah.
after leaving California, I would go to church and I did the same split. I was there was so much transition. It was actually very anxiety provoking. And
Hmm.
so I started smoking pot again.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I was just like back at it in a way.
Right. Right. What was the impetus for moving? Was
I
it
was
as simple as
bored.
that? It was bored, or I mean,
And I didn't really have anywhere to go. Like my mom,
but you knew you
I
wanted to
was
leave that
I knew I
place.
wanted to leave. I did leave at age 18. I just had to get out of that house.
Yeah.
She was driving me crazy. I couldn't handle watching her with my brothers. Like my middle brother is a total alcoholic that has a
Hmm.
mental illness, and he drops out of school. And
Yeah.
so I'm like watching all this, and I'm like, I can't be here. And so we get an apartment somewhere, but I've got all this like energy I don't know what to do with. And it's that flight energy. Like, I just need to go somewhere else. Something will be better somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
And
It's
so, and
yeah.
it was a really, it was like through those years of my life, it was this powerful wave. It would just kind of like, it was a machine of its own. It would just like, boop, let's go. And
Yeah.
my friend, I don't know why my friend agreed with it, but she was in a hard space too. And she and I had been friends since second grade. And I was kind of like, I mean, maybe she had a lot of this energy too. She and I were kind of like rebels without a cause in a lot of
Hmm.
ways, you know?
Yeah. Sort of this like pushing the fuck it button, energy.
Totally.
Just like
Oh,
fuck it, let's
oh
go.
yeah, that was like my motto. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah.
And then I moved to this really beautiful city. We lived in the DePaul area with her cousin until we drove her crazy, and then found a place of our own. And really, it was a big adventure. It was a grand adventure. I was already into positive thinking because my mom that's just the way we were wired. And
Hmm.
so I'm like, I'll get a job. How hard is to get a job? I go down to the Palmer House. You're supposed to be like, I think you were supposed to be 20 years old to serve wine. I'm like, yeah, I'm 20. I don't know where my driver's license is. And they didn't check those days. They didn't really care.
Hmm.
And yeah, I know how to shuck lobster. I had no idea. And so like the first night I'm out there and someone's asking me about wine, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like running, and now I'm filled with anxiety. I don't know it's anxiety. I'm also filled with shame because I'm like,
Hmm.
how the hell did I get in this moment?
Hmm.
And then I'm fired like 2 days later because they're like, you don't know what you're doing. I'm like, I don't. And so, but then I pick myself back up and I get another job and I get this other
Okay.
job. And it's like, I'm moving
Yeah.
so fast all the time.
Yeah.
It's like
Okay.
my youngest brother and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to figure it out because nobody's going to trap me. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's amazing is, I mean, your story, it really puts into perspective how much the personality is a survival mechanism.
Oh,
And
that's what the personality is. I
yeah,
really
I mean,
believe that. Yeah.
I'm kind of like just
Yeah.
amazed at
Yeah.
how you navigated that situation. I mean, it's like your core sevenness. Like, I feel inspired actually hearing you talk about it. I mean, like things
Oh,
happened really
oh,
that were very intense to you and
yeah.
very painful, but the way you were able to, like, your resilience and the way you were able to pick yourself up and just
Yeah.
keep moving, and
That
to
was
follow
key.
those inner impulses,
Yeah.
um, that had like a real wisdom, like, okay, we got to get out of this place, and okay, I need a job, I need resources, so let me try this thing.
Yep.
And who cares if I've never had experience? I'll just lie, I'll just make it work.
Right.
But a certain
Yeah.
like needing to or another thing that's coming up for me is like there's sevens get a pretty bad reputation sometimes for just being impulsive and selfish and whatever. But when you
Yeah.
hear a story like this and you're like, oh, this is what seven is for. It's
This is
like,
what seven is.
yeah,
Yes.
is
Like, I'm very
yeah,
grateful for that. I mean, I don't
yeah,
know
yeah,
how else I would have turned out, but it's like that's course sevens has saved my life over and over and over again.
right, right, right,
She is that part of me that can really think on her feet.
yeah,
And it shows up over and over and over again in my life. And
hmm
so and then I meet a boy. And this is where like you start to see, I have a lot of I'm self-pres. So like I am, oh God, am I. And so I meet a boy, he's a musician. I'm not that attracted to him, but I meet him and his family, and he's the youngest of four kids in an Italian family. And the mother is amazing. Like the mother sees me and she goes, "Sweetie, are you eating enough?" And I'm like, "No, I'm
uh-huh.
eating yogurt and ramen noodles every day." She goes, "Honey, you come here and I will give you food." And I'm like, "Holy shit, I just hit the payday." And I wasn't
Yeah,
aware of it at the time, but I
uh,
fell in love with her. I wanted her to be my mother.
uh-huh,
She
uh-huh.
was really capable. She
Right.
ran a household. She would feed me. She thought I was adorable.
It's kind of like
Again,
the first adult figure that actually could meet your
yes,
needs in the way that you
she
needed them to.
totally
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And because I'm so damn charming, she's like, "Oh my God, you're perfect for my boy, my
Hmm.
sweet little Tony." And he was just like the baby of an Italian family. And he was like, got everything he needed.
Uh-huh.
He was, he just, and then he was a guitar player and we'd go to the rock band shows and he was also a photographer and I'd be this little groupie and it was a bunch of fun. And then of course we started having sex and I got really nervous about all that. And so because my Christian morality, it was all
Hmm.
twisted up. And I'm
Hmm.
like, "We got
Hmm.
to get married. We're having sex." What? Oh, sweetie. I just wish I was there. But then my kids wouldn't have been born. But I was all mixed up inside. And
Hmm.
I think I just wanted to be in his family. And I just didn't know how to
Hmm.
do any of that. So we got married. I was
Wow.
20.
Yeah.
We got married. It was a couple years later. And boy, we were ill-equipped
I'm
for
fascinated
marriage.
just real quick about that because it's like, well, you have the six wing, right? And
Yeah.
the kind of loyalty to the mental constructs that you were raised in, even though they were so destructive
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
yeah, just is a good word actually to you.
Oppressive in a way. I
There you
think
go. Oppressive
oppressive
is a better
in a
word.
way.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah, but still this inner split of,
Yeah. Oh, huge.
yeah, massive inner split.
It starts to
Anyways,
get
that's
wider and wider throughout my story. Like
okay. Yeah.
it becomes like I am making decisions from one place and living out another place. And so I get married, and then we get pregnant a year later,
Hmm.
and we're not prepared. And I had gone off birth control. It was a night of partying. He was a pot smoker. We were
Hmm.
partying it
Hmm.
up,
Hmm.
and we conceived on our anniversary. And like it's like I was terrified. Like through my pregnancy, it was like I didn't know. I'm like, I can't be a parent. Holy shit! I never felt old enough, and so, but we have
And
our firstborn,
how old were you?
and that I was 23 when I had
Yeah.
him,
Hmm.
and no college. I'm
Hmm.
working at a ad agency, kind of working my way through it again, learning things I didn't go to school for, but like I had a way of opening doors. And he actually wasn't a good provider. He was only interested in playing music, so he's in and out of jobs. And then we have a baby, and he's still in and out of jobs. And it's like it's amping everything up for me.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I just press in harder to get the money, so be a waitress and go to church more because that's the only things I knew what to do. But
Hmm.
as I waitressed, I started hanging out with people that drank really good wine. We had to do wine tastings. I worked for Morton's of Chicago,
Hmm.
so it's a fancy steakhouse. I mean, I'd bring home like $300 in cash, and I'd be like, "Holy shit, this is awesome!"
Yeah.
But I'd also start drinking afterwards, and so I had little kids at home. I'd drive home drunk. Never
Hmm.
got caught.
Mm-hmm.
Wake up in the morning, get the kids off the way you're supposed to get the kids off, be present as a mama. And that started this just horrible cycle
Mm-hmm.
of this split life of not being happy in my marriage. He has typed himself, and I think we all agree, he's actually a core 6.
Okay.
And we were like bouncing off of each other all the time.
I can
He's
imagine
like,
that. Yeah.
worst thing's going to happen. I'm like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
it's not. Just ignore it. It'll be fine. And why are you complaining about that? You're always complaining. Like, I hated the complaining, but
Mm-hmm.
that's who I picked. I
Mm-hmm.
picked the thing actually that needed to be talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the way I see it, is like my attraction to Tony was I couldn't say all those things. So I picked a person that vocalized all my fears, even though I was in denial over them, all
Mm-hmm.
of the things.
Mm-hmm.
He called me, he's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that than this? And why are you changing your mind so much? And can't you hold a job? Because I would switch job. But I was always doing stuff. I would be over involved here, over involved there. The game for me was just keep moving,
Mm-hmm.
keep moving. And it's
Yeah.
typical 7. Like I became like a master at none.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just kind of skimmed it all.
Yeah.
Really didn't leave room for digestion.
Right. Right.
So anyway, yeah. So we have this marriage. We were married for 15 years. Finally I started going to therapy with him.
Okay.
And we just started I was like, oh, there's some stuff underneath.
Okay.
And, but
So that was your
basically
first
we got
contact with therapy.
a
That right there.
therapist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy was great. Jewish guy, kind of half comedian, half therapist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I started seeing me for the first time. Like, instead of being run by this personality, I started seeing it. Read the book Boundaries, and I'm like, oh wow, I have no edges in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just allow. If I don't like it, I just run. But I never just stand firm with a boundary. And so I
Mm-hmm.
started learning about that. And that started my journey in therapy. It took me we were in marriage therapy for 3 years, but that last year, this therapist helped us get divorced.
Okay.
In a way, I had read all the books on it, of course. I didn't want to hurt my kids. But there's a great book out there called The Good Divorce. And we really did our best to help keep our kids in the same house so that they wouldn't lose their house on top of losing their parents' marriage. And so I think we did the best we could. He and I couldn't be civil for a long time.
Okay.
We are now, thank God. But
Yeah.
in those days, I was too triggered.
Mm-hmm.
And then my 7 style, I met my next husband while I was getting divorced.
Okay. Yeah.
Isn't that incredible? He was
Yeah.
my mortgage broker. And you
Wow.
talk about
Okay.
self-pres energy.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Which
I
had
didn't
been,
know
which
it.
is,
I just felt really drawn to him. He was so kind to me. And
yeah.
and I had really literally written out what I wanted in a man. I had just read The Secret. And so I was trying to manifest all this stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Okay.
I just really want a kind man, and a man that because I was always getting in trouble, like in my marriage too. Like, my intention was always questioned.
Okay.
And it was like I couldn't seem to, with Tony and our relationship, we became enemies of each other. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so it was horrific. It was
Mm-hmm.
horrific to be thought of in that way, and I'm sure for him too. And so with Joe, he was like, look at you, you shiny sparkly thing. And so I was not in the really mind frame of meeting another guy. And so I kind of resisted it for a little while. I was like, I really don't, no, I'm not going on a date with you. And then he really persisted in this really sweet way. He's really sweet. And I'm like, well, I'll go on a date. What can that hurt? And we really clicked in some ways. And then I got curious about it. And I was like, I'll go on another date. And then I started dating him after that, but kept the kids from knowing him for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
But I never dated. I mean, after knowing my husband since 19, and then 15 or 20 years later, or how many years? I don't know. I'm terrible at math. I'm like, never dated before, and I meet Joe, and it's like I just fall in. I
How
fall in, and I
when was your divorce?
2005,
So how long were you
and
married?
I was married 15 years. Yeah,
Oh, oh wow. Okay.
yeah,
I had
I
a
know.
different okay, yeah. So that was a significant period of
So
time.
that's
Yeah.
the other side of
Yeah.
reframing. So the darker side of reframing is we will put up with for long periods of time. Since
Sure.
I'm not
Yeah.
connected to my heart space, right? Like it's really hard for me to be connected to that like relational connection. I just kept connecting to ideals, connecting to ideals, connecting to ideals and ideas and morality,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
really disconnected to what my body was saying, disconnected to what this
Mhm.
connection was. There was no connection between Tony and I had no connection.
For how long?
We had a very toxic connection, actually, from
Yeah.
the day one, from
Wow,
the
yeah.
beginning.
And
The day we
15
got
years.
married,
Yeah.
I was like, fuck, what the
Yeah.
fuck am I doing?
That's
I
so
mean, I even have
fascinating. Yeah.
pictures that day and I'm like, I can't stop it now. The train left the station. And I really
It's
believed that.
it's amazing to hear that from someone who's typing as, triple hexad 712,
Yeah.
to have that much self-abandonment, in a
Yeah.
moment, or for that prolonged a period of time. But it
I think
also
a lot of
speaks to
that's
the
trauma.
it's the trauma, and it's also
Hmm.
the inner split that we talked about
Yeah.
around, there's what you
Yeah.
want, there's how you were raised, there's the mental models that you're trying to justify your actions
Yeah.
within, or trying to
Yeah.
have some kind of compass about the right way of being. And
Yeah.
also one fix, two fix, superego. There's a lot that you could say about that. So there's,
I know. And
yeah.
it's been so helpful for me to understand the trifix. Like when I first was typed with that, I had done another trifix model, that woman, I forget her name, it was tri-type. But and I was a little different with that, but with this kind of felt like I'm like, oh, this is what the inner war is. Because it's an inner hell. It was an
Hmm.
inner hell for me for
Yeah.
many,
Yeah.
many years. Like there was no peace and serenity inside me.
Hmm.
Um, there was just a chasing. There was sometimes pure enjoyment. But there was no quiet.
Hmm.
Like I had no quiet.
Yeah.
Even when I started doing yoga during that marriage, it wasn't driven from a quiet place. It was driven more. I got to strengthen my core, and oh look, I can get really good biceps with this. And so it was very much body molding or objectifying. I did a lot of body objectifying.
Seeing the
I
body
was just
from the mental center as opposed to
yes,
being in the body. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Like I would put, like I have also knee issues because I ran so hard and
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
past pain tolerant. Like my pain
Yeah.
tolerance
Yeah.
was so high that my kneecap went out. I just had a knee replacement 2 years ago because of all the damage. It's
Hmm.
like I literally used my body as a tool,
Yeah. Yeah.
because my body was used as a tool, by the
That's right.
way.
I was just
And
thinking
I
that.
think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like it really reinforced that mental state
Hmm.
and furthered that split. And so being married to Tony, I was mostly married to the ideas, like of what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even in the beginning, my God, I was in so much fantasy. I saw something in him that was not there at all, at all. And I just made it up in my head.
Hmm.
And I did, and I still can have that tendency. I can
Hmm.
go, oh, this looks like fun. I'm going to show up to it. Holy shit, this is not like I imagined. And then
That's
there's
really
just like, you know,
that's really interesting, that point you're making there, because what I've experienced with sevens before, that I've found like sort of bewildering and confusing, is how they can like, I have a friend who's a seven, and we've kind of it's a very difficult relationship for me, so that I'm just gonna
mm,
preface it with it. But
yeah, yeah,
we've made a lot of progress, and we're doing a lot better as friends. We've known each other for a long time,
yeah.
but there's a way that in his world he can kind of um, there was a long period of time in our relationship where I felt like he wasn't actually seeing me. He was seeing some glossy, shiny version of me that he had digitized and placed in his own head. it's like he's
Yes.
holding this kind of Garden of Eden vision of his life in his head, and it's like, and here's my friend Josh, who's like a musician, and he's got this stuff going on, but it's kind
Yeah.
of like a mentalized,
Yes.
um, yeah, thing. It's not. It's like he's not actually
Yeah.
with me. You know what I'm saying? And so there's a way.
Yes.
I mean, uh, I guess what I'm saying, I experienced that on the receiving end of it from a person who I wanted to be like attuned to, and I felt very
Right.
frustrated by that. But what I'm hearing you say is that you kind of found yourself like that created suffering for you because
Oh, yeah.
not actually seeing him in the real way
Mhm.
that he is, and instead kind
Right.
of being loyal to that inner digitization of him, you could say, or whatever the fantasy ideal
Totally.
that you were holding in your head. Um,
Absolutely. And it still
yeah.
happens. Like, that's not something I escape. I think my brain is wired that way. Like, I'll work with
Hmm.
clients and I'll first, like, I see the potential. I
Sure.
just
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my work as a
I'm
therapist, which
hearing
has
some two
been,
stuff in there too, a little bit of two stuff, like the
oh,
or that 2-3 area, I would say, like
yeah,
a way of like on the one hand, like what gets emphasized with two is the offering and the giving and the wanting to help and all that kind of stuff. But what they're often, I think, like the mental center of two is trying to see that place in you that is really good that I can like nurture.
yes.
Anyway, so I'm 7-2 stem maybe.
I love that you because I'm married a two.
Okay.
Joe is
Yeah.
a Joe is a what do they call it? Um, because I think it's two. I think he's a 269. Um, anyway, like
Mm-hmm.
he sees me as good,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and even when I'm up, like I'm not being good. He's like, you didn't mean that. Oh, Kim, come
Okay.
on, yeah. And
Interesting.
so
Okay.
constantly like updating my and so we have an interesting relationship because we're both very optimistic. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's been when we've been together now, we're going on 19 years this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like we've really in a lot of
Wow.
ways, I see that my two tendencies when I watch him,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like how he also created this kind of vision of who I was when he met me. And I did the same with him. And here we both are.
Right.
I mean, because we're both sexual blind, and we're
Okay. Yeah.
both just like I don't know what that is. We're both like we got both got movies in our head, and so for us over the years, it's really been like we've had to do some real tough work to connect. And
Mm-hmm.
today, it's like more of a practice for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like his tendency to gloss over everything has brought him a ton of pain. And
Mm-hmm.
my tendency to gloss everything has brought me a ton of pain. So we've both like I have practice we both have a practice in the morning. When he gets up, we sit down, we look each other in the eye. How you doing? What's going on? How was your sleep? Let's just do a check-in. Because
Mm-hmm.
before it was just like we'd both be I'd be over in my work, my journaling, my creation. He'd be like doing his thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We'd have breakfast together and listen to a story and
Yeah.
go on our day and then do our stories.
Yeah.
And it's just like it became just kind of like we were both these kind of orbiting planets
Right. Right.
instead of being on the
Yeah.
same planet. So it's been really interesting to kind of see that mechanism. And I really and I think I talked about it earlier with you yesterday or the other day that the only way I can really connect to another human being is to start to pay attention to my body.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. To start to come back,
Mm-hmm.
go, okay, yeah, I always start here. I think this is just maybe because that's the heart. Okay, I've got some energy here. What is that telling me? Overall, what's going on? And all right, here I am with this other human being. Wow, that's cool. What's going
Mm-hmm.
on with this other human being? And it's just, it kind of brings me back. And then
Mm-hmm.
with the therapy, being a therapist, that's actually honed that. Because
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
literally for 50 minutes, I am, I am in. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I am focused, I'm
Mm-hmm.
engaged, I'm tuned in,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really good at that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has been my training, I believe. Or I think maybe because I've had therapy and I had someone do that for me, like my therapist, Steven, that's what he would do. I'd literally walk in and sit as far away from him as possible. And the only reason I saw a man is because he was my friend's supervisor and he worked with horses. And so he was
Okay.
kind of like
Yeah.
my cowboy therapist.
Okay.
He'd
Yeah.
literally like take off his cowboy boots. He
Mm-hmm.
kind of, he's got a lot of 8 energy. And he would, and when we were doing, I was like really into the Enneagram about 15 years ago, brought in the Riso and Hudson book. I'm like, I think I'm 7. He was like, I bet you are. I'm like, what are you? He goes, I'm an 8. I'm like, oh, okay. And so he would just like be planted, and I could just feel his presence and his attunement. And I did not have that before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
that really started to help me. And then gradually, it took me a couple of years to realize, I'm like, do people normally sit all the way over here, or do they sit by you more? And he goes, and he kind of laughs and he goes, yeah, they usually sit right here. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
he's like, yeah, you've got a direct line to the door. Did you notice that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh my God, no, I didn't know that. And so with this kind of work, I was able to start to see, I call the shenanigans, my shenanigans. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we would have whole sessions, and at the last 15 minutes, the bubbles started coming down.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, and he goes, I know. He goes, I'm going to write this down and we're going to start next session with this, because we'd have to. Like sometimes it would take me so long to get into the meat of what was going on, to really digest what was going on. And I was on for a decade, and it took a long time for me
That's fascinating to me. And man, okay. There is, part of the underlying theme of your story is that you were in this essentially flight mode and had an inner split for a really long time. I mean, since early childhood, you know, and throughout your whole first marriage, you had this kind of inner split and a way of convincing yourself why you needed to stay in it. And through the couples therapy with him, that was your first contact with therapy, and you started getting more language under you and integrating a new frame to understand what's really going on with you, and starting to actually encounter yourself in an interior way. So that was the first, that was kind of your first entry point to that. And now you are a therapist. So that's a pretty extraordinary journey right there. Which I'm curious about what drew you to that. I have a sense of it because you've talked about how even as a kid, you had almost like a sixth sense ability to be with people, you know?
I did.
And I find this to be true of people who have experienced some element of darkness in their life. They have that intuition, or the intuition gets awoken in them about how to do that. And that's even true for you as a 7, as a triple hexad type, that the stereotype of 7 is, well, not necessarily the best kind of drop in and listen kind of person, but there it is. You had that when you were young.
Oh yeah.
And what I'm building to is, I'm fascinated hearing you talk about your work with your therapist, where you could go let's say it's an hour session, you could talk for 35 minutes in just the kind of the material generated in a mentally frothy way. And it's just like, it's almost like, I think of it as like, I think of mental types, especially 6 and 7, as having like a little blender in here, you know?
Oh yeah.
And
that's exactly what it is.
And the blender, it's like, you know, when you're like blending a smoothie, and like you can see that there's like the meat of the smoothie and the berries and stuff, that like the pulp down here, but then there's that like froth layer up top, you know. And mental types can get so ping-ponging around in that froth and you pour the blender out, that's the first thing that pours out is the froth, you know. And it's like you have to burn through all that froth before you can actually get to the bottom of the thing. And it almost makes me question like the model of an hour therapy session for a mental type, because it's like you need more to get through all that before you can actually settle in and then experience the body and get to the real stuff.
I'm actually going to tell you what works. Remind me of that, because there is a model that works for mental types.
Oh, I would love to hear about that. But I'm fascinated by this. Like how did you do that? How did you get through the froth to this place? And it sounds like your therapist was helpful
He was.
You know,
So,
go ahead.
yeah. So like, as I remember it, like during our sessions, this probably was like 3 or 4 years in, I started realizing like I come up with the meat of it at the end and it's just so frustrating.
Right. Yeah.
And so we started talking about that and what that was. And then
Mm-hmm.
I think what happened first. Okay, then my mother, I literally saved my mother from a very toxic marriage. Um, she married a sociopath. I'm telling
Okay.
you, this guy was creepy as hell and said he loved Jesus, all that. And I started noticing my mom started changing. So at the time, she was living in like right in the middle of Kansas, and it's a whole story. But my husband and I, she had called me because I kept saying, Mom, at any time you feel in trouble, if you feel endangered, you call me and we will come down and get you. And she's like,
Okay.
well, I'll never divorce. I'm like, I'm not saying that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying there is something about him. I'm scared. And you are telling me some things that are very concerning.
Yeah.
And so one morning she calls me and she goes, hi, hon, how you doing? Things are going good here, but I think it's time for you to come down and get me. I'm like, oh,
Okay.
okay. So we go and get
It's a
her.
classic.
And she
That's a good
comes,
9 moment right there.
yeah,
Things are going
yeah.
great,
And she's,
but could you come get me?
things are great. Can you come and get me? Because he's scaring the shit out of me. And so we went down and got her, and it's a whole story. But we got her and we brought her back home, and she lived with us for 9 months. I lost my mind.
Yeah.
Literally lost my mind.
Yeah.
I was just like, what the hell? I wanted to kill her. I literally would have dreams about killing her in her sleep.
Yeah.
And I had never really worked on this.
Okay.
And because when I was 19, I moved away. I never had to deal with her like this. And so I'm working with Stephen. I didn't know about EMDR. I knew a little bit about, oh, that's right. I had had some EMDR before I had worked with Stephen over something else. And so I come into my session. I'm like, Stephen, I want to kill my mother, blah, blah, blah. He goes, I think maybe there's something attached to this. So we started doing EMDR. EMDR is not a mental space talk therapy. EMDR is somatic.
Can you say
And
what
what
it
you
stands for,
do,
EMDR?
EMDR is eye movement reprocessing. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really kind of an unfortunate moniker because it actually is more than that.
Okay.
It's not just the eyes moving.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the process of getting in touch with the thing that's the most disturbing about the situation.
Okay.
And at the time, and it's called a targeting. So we target a sequence. We don't process it and make sense of it. We just go, what is so disturbing about this? Why do you want to kill your mother?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then so I targeted it, and then you go to image. What image comes to you that matches that target?
Interesting. Yeah.
And then what is your core belief about this situation? Why is it so disturbing for you? On a scale of 0 to 10, how disturbing? 7? Oh, wow. Okay, so what's your core belief here? Mine was I can't get away. And so I can't get away. I can't get away from her. I can't get away from her weirdness. She's living in my house. I can't get away.
Mm-hmm.
And then what would you rather have that be? What would be more adaptive? This is called adaptive information processing.
Mm-hmm.
So you're taking the information and you're processing it through your system, through all your centers. And so,
and just real quick, an image, image comes from the right brain, which is more connected to your body than a left brain rationalization process. And so that's just to name that.
And just side note, some people can't come up with images. Some people have, I've worked with clients that only can do conceptualizations. They actually can't do pictures. I can do pictures. I got a lot of pictures. Mm-hmm. And so we started to go through that. And we did classic EMDR, which is watching the fingers go back and forth at like 30 seconds, 45-second intervals. And what it does is it gives your brain a chance to deal with the material, come back out, deal with the material, come back out,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
deal with the material as something else is happening. And it's called dual processing. It's also
Amazing. Yeah.
called, it's like taxing the working memory.
Sounds like a
So,
brilliant modality. I've never experienced it, but I've read about it a lot. It
oh, the
sounds
story on
yeah.
how the person came up with this is pretty cool. But yeah. So we're doing this and I'm starting to get, I haven't dealt with my molestation yet before this.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That starts to come up because
Okay.
what starts to happen is it's it's almost like allowing the brain, allowing the neural network that moves all the way through our body. Like we have neurons in our heart, we have neurons in our gut. It allows them to start to piece together the story of this is connected to. Because if there's a disturbance in their body, the body is telling you something is disturbing you, but it
Mm-hmm,
doesn't
mm-hmm,
sound like it's right now time.
mm-hmm.
This disturbance comes from somewhere long ago. And so as we started to do EMDR, which there's not a lot of processing, it basically is like, watch my fingers. What do you notice?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you notice that? Go with that. Okay. What do you notice? Nothing. Go with nothing. Go with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you notice? Go with that. What do you notice? Go with that. And then it happened pretty quickly that I was like, oh my God. And he's like, what? I go, I was molested. He goes, did you know this before? I'm like, kind of. I've
Mm-hmm.
kind of talked around it,
Mm.
but I just got a flash. Go with that.
Wow.
I just got more. Go with that. You don't even have to talk about it. I have a client right now I'm working with. I go,
Mm-hmm.
go with that. I go, what did you notice? She goes, I'm like,
Uh-huh.
go with that. What
Right.
did you
Right. Right.
notice?
Yeah.
Go with that. Because you don't need to talk about it for your brain to process it. So yeah, so EMDR is a powerful modality for those that intellectualize. I mean, it's a
Mm-hmm.
powerful modality, I think, for anybody, but
Okay.
particularly for our
But for mental types
like
in
people
particular.
that like
Yeah.
to talk about it, talk
Yeah.
around it,
Okay.
right? Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. That's powerful. Cool.
So that started opening me up to more of this sense of there is a lot more going on underneath. And so I started doing morning pages
Yeah.
through
From the
Julia
artist's way.
Cameron's
Yeah.
work. And then I started devoting myself to writing. Actually always been a writer. Like that was a good modality for me. And again, you think about it, that takes it out of the head space, moves it through your body, and you're able to like watch your hand. You're able to interact with the words, and so they becomes more embodied.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you almost get to see it from
And
the
it slows down.
outside.
It's a slow process
It
writing.
slows it down, and then
Yeah.
you can digest it.
Yeah.
And so around that time is when I was in a series of jobs that I hated and getting really burned out. And then I got laid off from the job I really hated. But this
Mm-hmm.
job, actually, I started as a receptionist, then moved into admin because I learned all the programs because I was bored out of my mind as a receptionist.
Mm-hmm.
And people were like, oh, do this for me. And oh, do you know Excel? I'm like, no, but I'll learn. And so I had a real aptitude for learning software. And so I learned all the software, became an admin, and I was working for a diesel engine place. It was a Japanese-owned firm. So my manager gets laid off. And it's like 3 years in. My manager gets laid off, and I'm like, I'm running this fucking department as an admin, and I want to be the manager. So I was reading the 4 Hour Work Week at the time.
Oh
Do you
yeah.
remember that book?
Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah. Tim Ferriss. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally inspired by Tim Ferriss, by the way. Love
Mm-hmm.
his energy, right? And is he a 7, a 3? What is he? He's
He's
like,
a 3. I think he's a triple competence 3, 315 or
okay,
351, and he's
triple
self-pres
confidence.
social. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So loved him. And
Yeah.
one of the questions was like, do something really hard at your job that really scares the shit out of you, but
Mm-hmm.
that might open up more opportunity for you. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm going to talk to the president. I'm going to talk to Nakaoka-san and talk to him and see if I can be the manager of this. Because I was like making 32,000 a year. I was making no money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get it all together. I put it on an Excel spreadsheet with like charts and graphs. And at the time, I had just been trained for Lean Six Sigma, which is a very
Right.
it's a process, right?
Like that
It's an
warehouse
improvement process.
operational process thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. and I was really good at it. And so I go in and I had to make an appointment. He's like, he's a president that's like on his last term. Like in Japanese culture, they had terms where they would come out to the United States or into a different country, and then they'd go back, and then they come out. And he was on his last term, and he was going to be retiring.
Yeah.
And he was an imposing figure. He was always dressed in this really nice suit. He had this big office. And I walk in and I go, Nakaoka-san, I have some ideas I'd like to share with you. And so I shared with him some improvement processes that I've been working on, and some of the like some of the stuff that I achieved through it, and then some of the things that this department could do.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, but Kim-san, we have no manager. How do we do this? I go, sir, respectfully, I can do this. He goes, and his eyebrows would do this crazy dance. Like he had these like eyebrows that moved like this. And he goes, Kim-san, oh, that takes a lot of, what do you call, balls.
Okay.
And it was cracking up. And I'm like, yes, sir, it does. And he goes, I don't know, you're not an engineer. I'm like, you don't need to have an engineer for this job. And I showed him why. And he goes, I'm going to think about it. And then I had learned, you got to close it with time. And I said, well, sir, if you could let me know by Friday. And it was like a Wednesday. If you could let me know. He's like, Kim-san, that is bold. And so by the end of the day, he calls me back and he goes, I thought about it. And I would like you to run the department for a year under my supervision and the sales staff's supervision. I'm like, all right. And he goes, and this is what we will offer you. We'll offer you $51,000. I was making $32,000, $51,000. Does that work for you? And I poker face. I'm like, I need 24 hours to think about that. Because it was, I don't know. It's like I read all this stuff, right? And so, I'm really good at doing what I read, if it makes sense to me. So I got the job. I'm in over my head. Again, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm sent all over the world. I got to go to Japan 3 times. I went to Milan. We had a factory there. I went all over the United States. I was the only female in the room most of the time. And by the end of the year, he's like, unfortunately, we need an engineer in this position. And I'm like, yes, thank God. He goes, so I'm so sorry. We're going to give you a $5,000 raise. I'm like, oh, okay. So I get a raise. I'm an admin. And then 6 months later, it's 2008. And the company is like, it's really hit by the economic downturn.
Yeah.
And so they lay all of us off. And I'm laid off. And I'm so happy to be laid off because I hate this job by this point.
Yeah.
I get laid off with a 6-month severance. And so I can't get a job because I don't have a degree. It doesn't matter. I've been a manager. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? So I go back to school and I start volunteering at a equine assisted therapy place. And then I go to DePaul, get my bachelor's.
Equine therapy, you were aware of equine therapy because Steve did that. Is that true?
Yes. And I read a couple of books on it, some really cool books on it. And so I'm like helping out with that kind of stuff. And I get my degree through DePaul.
And you had a horse when you were a kid, as I remember.
I did. Yes, I did. Yeah. And so I get the degree from DePaul. Finally, a couple of years go by. I get a job at the school my eldest is going to. So I get a couple of semesters paid for. I mean, this is the pattern. The pattern is
this is
I go.
This is a classic 7 thing. I don't understand it, honestly. It's like a magical synergy. Manifesting.
It's miraculous.
It's weird
I
how it
believe
happens.
in magic. I live by magic. I'm a manifester like nobody is. And my husband to this day, he's like, oh yeah, she's, no doesn't work for Kim. And no doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
I don't even know what no means. No means like I got to think about it in a different way. And so, so I get this degree. I'm working at my kid's college, get him through school. I hate that job too. I don't want to work in business. I decide I want to be a novelist. I want to write some fantasy. So I go to the husband. I'm like, honey, I know you're really excited about me having a job and I got insurance and everything, but I need to take a year off and write.
Mm-hmm.
And, by this point, I think Joe's probably just exhausted by me. He goes, I don't know about that, Kim. Are you sure? Are you sure? And that's always the question with him. Are you sure? Are you sure? I'm like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I'm sure. I'm always sure. And so I start that. And in the middle of this, I am really drinking a lot, meaning I'm not
Okay.
starting the day off,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm definitely topping off the day, starting about 5 o'clock when I get home, pouring my wine. I belong to a wine club.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not that happy.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm not happy at all. I'm
Yeah.
I'm really trying to find the next thing. So I take this time off. I'm starting to write, and I get into this really cool story. Like I still love the story, and I'll probably go back to it someday. But I'm starting to write this fiction piece, and it's about a young girl who's 12, who is a Mexican American who can hear animals talk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's a whole story about her. It's kind of overlaid with a lot of the race tension in probably in California, a lot of with Mexicans and white
Okay.
people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just this weird but unorthodox way she is. And so
Mm-hmm.
so I'm starting to like write that out, but I'm drinking more at night. I'm like losing interest in it. And so then I take up like, oh yeah, I did mosaics for a while. Like I couldn't write. So I started doing mosaics. And then I come back to writing because I feel guilty because that's what I told Joe I'd be doing. And
Uh-huh.
and I and I'm feeling like I'm living a fun life, but it's not going well. And then it turns into 2 years, and Joe's business is not doing well. It's like he's a mortgage broker, so it's like there was another downturn a little bit later on, and so his business is not doing well. There's a lot of pressure for me to get a job, and I can't wrap this story up. I'm at 50,000 words, and I can't figure out an ending. And I kind of hardly remember this point. I think I was in such a depression that I just couldn't crawl out of this one. And I've
Mm-hmm.
had a couple of instances happen like that in my life where I had to go on antidepressants. I couldn't crawl out of it. It was like the whole world was closing in on me.
I'm so fascinated by
And
these moments of your life where you found
yeah,
yourself trapped in
yeah,
a project or a relationship
yeah,
and it's so counter to what we typically think of as seven as like
I know.
when I feel trapped I'll just like fuck it I'll get out but there's a way that you've found yourself in these trapped places but this one was
Well,
only
I think it's
yeah
the gluttony. I think the gluttony leads to entrapment. And so
oh that's a
my
beautiful statement
race,
yeah mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah
So my mentalization,
mm-hmm.
so I'm a mental glutton. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I still
Mm-hmm.
am.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get enough information and
Mm-hmm.
or stories or ideas or whatever to tickle
Mm-hmm.
my little brain there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that just wears itself down, and I'm not dealing with the high cortisol levels in my body. I'm not dealing with any of it. And actually at the time I was doing hot yoga. I was literally going extreme too in my body. But again, even though I had done some EMDR and I was starting to get some healing around that, I still had to me, it felt like the last survival skill, which was my drinking. And it had gotten a hold of me. Like I was addicted for sure. And so, I mean, it was an everyday drinking too much to the point where I just would pass out at the end of the night. And, but it was all alone too. So
yeah
not alone. I mean, Joe was there, and Joe would kind of go, "What are you doing? Your personality seems to change when you do this." But he
yeah
was so like he would not. He was so like he couldn't. I was scary. I can be scary. Like if I
mm-hmm.
want something, don't step in my way. And Joe was be like, "Okay, okay, I just want you to love me. I'll do whatever I
uh-huh
can to make you love me." He's that
he was
total
getting in the way
enabling.
of the alcohol of your
Yeah,
drinking. Yeah, got it.
yes,
Right. Right.
he would do it his own two way, which was never very good for me because I would just roll over him and say, "You don't get to tell me what to do. This is
Mm-hmm.
me. This is my body. I don't have a problem." And all the
And
while,
and
I'm like,
also it had. I mean, it was. I imagine it was in a certain way. I could imagine. I don't know that you would have used this word, but like it would have been sacred to you because it's been the way that you've coped for for your whole life
Yes.
since you were young, you know?
Beautiful word. It was
Yeah.
sacred. It was
Yeah.
sacred. And it was a sacred ritual.
Right.
It was a
Right.
whole ritual. Beautiful glass
Mm-hmm.
in a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful home. I had a beautiful home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had a lot of money. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I came from poverty to like having all my needs met. Being able to take like 2 years and be able to write a novel. It was like I was reveling in it, but so much so I got lost in it and it was coming down on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I I was like, I got to do something. I think I'll go get a master's degree.
Okay.
And it was
Uh,
out of that energy.
yeah. Yeah.
I made a decision to become a therapist. And I
And this
think
is,
because
by the way,
Stephen was,
just had you gotten a college degree yet or no?
yeah, I had gotten my bachelor's with like a business
Oh, that's right.
administration
I think you said that. That's right.
through
Okay.
DePaul. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then so I was talking with Stephen at the time. I'm like, I think I'm going to become a therapist. He goes, I think you'd be a really good therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think because I love the idea of it, the
Mm-hmm.
idea of helping people as
Mm-hmm.
much as Steve helped me. Steve helped me so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
EMDR helped me so much. And so I had this vision. And so I go to an online Capella. Capella's online because I don't want to be trapped in a actual building. And
uh,
and they had all the K Cup credited, which is what I needed for my licensing. And so I did the journey. It's 3 years. In the middle of that journey, um, I'm doing well in school. It's my jam. I had to stop drinking so much at night because you couldn't do your work, and I had to be excellent at my work. I had to be excellent. And that was some of the stuff we were unpacking through therapy. It's like I could not get less than 4.0. And
mm-hmm.
so the goal was to try to get less than 4.0, but I wouldn't do it. And so I had this awful so I went dry for a while. I was like, I can't drink. It's getting in the way of my success. And so for a little while at first, actually the first year of my master's program, I completely went dry. I thought then too, I'm like, I think I have a problem. If I can't stop by myself, then I'll do something else. But so I stopped by myself, which I had been able to do most of my life. Like I could stop for long periods of time for a greater good, a greater purpose. This is where one comes in. I really believe it. This is where like one's like, there's something better than this. And it has a moral, it kind of has a moral flavor to it. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so I go to my first year, doing well. I've had a year, I've had no alcohol in my system. And I go to my friend's house and I'm like, I don't think I'm an alcoholic. I obviously can stop. I'm like, let's celebrate with like a glass of wine. Within the week, I had broken all my own rules. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
drink at home.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't drink by myself. I joined a wine club again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like spending tons of money on alcohol. And Joe's like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, he never asked me in that way. That's the way I would ask. He would be like, hun, how many glasses is that? Don't you be telling me how many glasses I'm drinking. And so
mm-hmm.
for that year, the drinking got worse, but I wasn't working and I was able to cobble together I'm still getting good grades, going to therapy, doing all the things. And a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, we were talking every day. She was a therapist and she had relapsed and almost died. She had mixed alcohol in her sleeping pills.
Yeah.
And I was mortified. And I think it checked something in me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I'm going to come out to Florida and I'm going to spend some time with you to help you.
Okay.
And I think this was during a break of mine during school. And so I stopped drinking that day. I had drunk.
Was
I
that
had
T-fix activated there also?
Oh, totally two-fix got activated.
Yeah.
And I mean, I call it my codependency. So I had a ton of codependency, and I think that's that two-fix. So I go out to Florida, get off the airplane. I'll still remember this. I was shaky. I was a mess. And my friend's like, let's get some food. Let's get some water. She goes, you are not in good shape. And I'm like, I'm fine. Just low blood sugar. And she goes, would you want to go to a meeting with me? And I'm like, an AA meeting? I'm like, I kind of feel weird about that. Like, what do I say when they ask me? I'm not going to say I'm an alcoholic. I'm not an alcoholic. And she goes, no, you can just say, hi, I'm here with my friend. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And that was my social anxiety. Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, there's going to be all these people there. What?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
had no context for AA except from maybe movies and stuff. And so we go to this meeting and they're all talking about these things. And I hardly remember that meeting, but there was something about it. They were all women
Mm-hmm.
and they were all like normal looking, beautiful women, like just normal women, right? And something, again, it was the same sort of experience I had on the Angels outfield. Something
With the
pierced
Billy
the
Graham thing.
veil.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
Something pierced the veil. All of a sudden, it was kind of quiet inside. And it was this knowing that alcohol had become the thing that separated me from
Mm-hmm.
joy, from life. Alcohol had completely inserted itself in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trapped in it,
Wow.
literally trapped in it. Like, it was a horrifying and relieving moment. And one of the most, I think, one of the most important moments in my life.
It sounds like it. Yeah. It also sounds
Yeah,
like it had a slightly different quality than the Billy Graham awakening, which was
yeah,
not to be too boxy about this, but it feels like
right.
the earlier one had the kind of I feel seen. I like a sort of I like a heart has a heart quality. This one has like a feels like a mental clarity, the
Yes,
piercing light of illumination, kind of like
yes.
oh I see. I didn't see before, but now I see.
Now I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I wept.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wept. All of a sudden, like all that energy just released. And my friend, she was in a hard place herself,
Mm-hmm.
but she really helped me through that. And that first week, we went to meetings every day. I learned the lingo quick because that's what I do. And I just listened to what they told me. And they just
Mm-hmm.
said, you know, alcoholism is a disease. It's not your fault. You got hooked and it hooks
Mm-hmm.
you. And all alcohol wants to do is kill you. And I got that. I was like, okay, I get that. So just come to meetings and don't drink. I'm like, okay, I can do
Mm-hmm.
that. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, maybe just do 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm like, I love goals and I'm going to get an A plus on this one.
uh,
And so I did. I literally, when I get into something like that, and I hear there's some sort of thing you got to measure up to, and it's kind of competence, but it's mostly about achieving. I like achieving because I get high off achieving, right? And
mm-hmm.
so I did the 90 and 90. I found myself like AA works for me. It doesn't work for
Mm-hmm.
everybody. I'm not one to tell anybody, but for me, I needed something to anchor me. And it's a very mental program,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like read this, do this, and then there is a heart of it. Start learning to tell the story. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
start learning to listen to the stories. Okay, start learning to listen to their story and find this common denominator. And so it's just real training on coming back, I believe, into relationship with human beings. Because at the core of addiction is disconnection,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
addiction keeps us away from connecting to people. And so, yeah, AA has opened up my life. And it took a few years. Like the first 3 years were really me kind of coming back to my body and starting to do yoga in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
like yoga with another practitioner and also like trauma informed yoga. I've done a lot of that.
Okay.
And we're learning breath techniques to do deep breath work or yoga type breath to get me like into my body. And so
Mm-hmm.
these practices over the years, I now have peace.
Mm-hmm.
I can now have empty mind, not for
Right.
long periods of time and not 100% of the time, but I can reach those places where I can just sit and be. That's been incredible. That's been the
Wow.
biggest gift for me.
That's yeah, that's remarkable.
Yeah,
So you're sober, you're a
I'm
vegan,
sober.
and you're a
I'm a
therapist.
vegan and I'm a therapist. Yeah, yeah,
It's amazing to have arrived in that place after
yeah.
What's the vegan thing? Just like the headline of that.
So that is, it's actually very self-pres. So
Okay.
my father died of cancer because he didn't pay attention to his body. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I had a girlfriend who got breast cancer, and I was part of her last 6 weeks of life down at the Brzezinski Clinic. It was a last ditch effort. And
Mm-hmm.
I was their cook, and I worked with their nutritionist, and their nutritionist said, she's not to have any animal products. Animal products, in a lot of studies, the China study is one of them, suggests that too
Yeah.
much animal products puts a body out of balance. And cancer cells like eat that shit up. They eat
Right. Right.
sugar up and they eat that shit up. So I got really clear, and I loved to cook anyway. My mom was a terrible cook growing up. My mom was an awful cook because she couldn't do timing well. So
Mm-hmm.
all of us kids were all foodies. And so I was really big on vegan, finding good vegan foods at the time. And this was
Mm-hmm.
like, so it's been about, I was a vegan before I was in AA. So I've been a
Mm-hmm.
vegan for about 12 years.
Okay.
But so she ended up not making it. She actually died of MRSA because her immune system was so screwed up. But after that, it just like made an impact on me. Plus, I have a thing about animals, and I'm friends with animals. And
Mm-hmm.
like when I was growing up, I was talking to all the animals
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
read all those fantasy books.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really a real easy thing for me to do, is just to give up the animal proteins and, yeah, be a
You know,
plant-based eater.
it kind of strikes me that the vegan thing, I mean, yeah, it's a self-pres thing, but it also has this um, way of connecting you to your sense of self, like your heart, who you are,
Yeah.
your values, and there's a way that there's been
Yeah.
this gradual over time,
Yeah.
the sobriety piece being another element of it,
Right.
coming home to yourself and living from the
Yes.
inside out,
Yes.
and reintegrating all the split pieces that were once asunder in you. And
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Yeah, because I gotta
yeah.
say, I think animals for me were we always had a lot of animals, and I would spend a lot of time with my animals. They were safer to me than people. And so
Mm-hmm.
even today, like when I go and hang out with my horse, I am centered, calm. There's zero anxiety
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I just feel like, I don't know, this horse, he's in his own being. He's true to himself, his nature. He's not going to do anything toward me that's going to hurt me. And so I don't know, there's just this real connected. I mean, I'm probably like that with nature anyway. My dad was kind of a naturalist, and so he introduced us a lot to trees and outside and camping. And so whenever I need to kind of ground myself, I can just I've got these 3 willows out in the backyard, and I just kind of watch them wave back and forth. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it just helps. It helps really remind me that I'm a little cell in some bigger organism here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a part, you know?
So I'm noticing the time, and we should probably come to a close in a little bit. But I
Yeah.
have one or two final questions for you. So now that you are here and you've arrived in this place of life where you're, I mean, literally sober, and also I'm thinking of the Virtue of 7, which is called sobriety,
Right.
which is, a kind of like mental clarity of like being able to just not have the snow globe all shook up inside you, and then entertain all that gluttony, but there's a way, like an inner stillness that starts to become more ever present.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm wondering is like, what's your current relationship with gluttony, or the revving of the mental sensor and that frothy blender stuff that we talked about? Does it still come up for you? How
Oh
does
yeah.
it? Yeah. So how does it? And
Yeah.
and what do you do now? What are your tools for working with that?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is this IFS work.
Okay.
It's the noticing, like when it's
IFS being
happening.
internal family systems for people
Internal
who
family
yeah.
systems work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the noticing when it rises. And she's a she inside of me. And
Mm-hmm.
she's anywhere between 12 and 14. And she's on the move. And she's looking for a hit of something. And I'm like, hey, hi, what's up? I just want to remind you that we're 56 now.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
I want,
yeah,
and then I do this.
yeah.
And this is a really cool process. I literally go across my midline and orient
Mm-hmm.
myself, and I look around and I look at all of the beauty and all of the things that I created around me. And
Mm.
I'm like, we made it. We're okay.
Wow.
I know you're really excited about this idea, and we're going to get to it. But right now, we're going to focus on this. And I've been doing this for a while now, and she feels like she's heard because she does have a lot of excitement and a lot of like, I've got this generator inside of me. Gosh, I just generates ideas. And so now it's like, I'm like, you know what? I love that idea. I'm going to put a pin on it. And then I'm going to talk to Joe, because remember Joe, we're in partnership with Joe, and he's really a good one to understand our scheduling. Or I look at the schedule. I'm like, this is what we have on our schedule, and this is what we got going on. I know that sounds like fun, but we like to do this stuff too, and this is fun. And so I'm just constantly doing this dialogue, and that settles me down immediately now. Immediately. The frothing stops,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm able to sit and be in this moment and just really go, hey, I like this moment right now. And I've done a lot of work with like Byron Katie work.
Yeah, yeah,
Eckhart Tolle. I was really into Eckhart Tolle for a long time.
yeah.
I'm forgetting his name, but that surrender book.
Oh, the surrender
Gosh, I did,
experiment. Is it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What is his name? Michael something.
Michael Singer. Singer?
Yeah, singer.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I did a whole class with a bunch of people with him, and it's just like continuing to orient oneself to the present. Continue to orient oneself to
Uh-huh.
the present. So yeah, so that's my process. Like
Right.
orient to the present. Orient to the present. The present is always a good place. It reminds me actually of work with horses. Like when I'm working with my horse, he learns that standing still right next to me is a safe and quiet place. And if he starts to do his shenanigans and he gets like not paying attention, I actually invite him into running around a little bit, but my focus is on him. And then I release the pressure. I
Mm-hmm.
take a deep breath, and then he comes and he stands right next to me.
Wow.
And that I feel like is my process for me. Like sometimes I need a little direction. Like if I have a bunch of ideas, like I've got all this flight of ideas, I kind of check in. I go, okay, lots of ideas, but what is this a reaction to? Oh, I'm hungry. A lot of times it's because I'm
Uh-huh.
hungry.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like basic needs. Or I just woke up and I had a weird dream. And so I got a little triggered, or I had an interaction with a human being that kind of threw me off. Or like I know sometimes with some of my clients, it doesn't happen as much now, but I'll get done with a session and go, I need to take another class on that. I don't know enough about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that mentalization going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I can't help
Right.
them. Holy shit, what are we going to do? Are they trapped?
Right.
Are they feeling bad? Oh my God, let's take another class. And I'm one of those. I mean, I'm a class junkie. I've got way too many CEUs, but a lot of the energy I've learned over the years is that energy. Like it gets frothy, and really, I know enough. And actually, when I'm in my self energy, I'm really wise.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that self to part relationship that I've been growing. Like my part's going, what? There's a self around here?
Mm-hmm.
We've never had a self around here. We've
Mm-hmm.
always been on our own.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like, yeah, here she is. This is the self. And she knows it all. In fact, I believe she knows it from the beginning of time. Like I have a sense self energy is from the beginning of time,
Hmm.
and that we do have everything we need to know at the moment.
Hmm.
And so, but a lot of times that's too abstract for some of my parts. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
fuck that. Really? That's bullshit.
Hmm.
And so that's that counter-phobic six energy in me
Yeah.
that I do
Yeah.
towards myself even.
Sometimes I've thought of the self, like, just to for people who are listening, what you're referencing is this idea in parts work where you have parts in you that are, well, like a part of you wants to get out of bed, a part of you wants to stay in, And then there's also self with a capital S. That's who you really are. And then you can have relationships with each of these parts in you. And getting into self is like, well, that's the way that the IFS framework essentially thinks about presence. It's the presence
Yes.
is when you're present, you're inhabiting self and you're able to relate to these parts in you and not have the parts take over your whole consciousness. And I think of the self as being an alignment of your three centers. You have to be, at least my experience of my,
Yeah.
when I really contact and I'm inhabiting my own self, it's like I'm in my body, I'm feeling like myself in my heart, and my mental center is open and clear and not cluttered with that frothy, sparky energy. So,
Well said.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, yeah, I'm taking a breath here.
This went by so fast.
I know, and we've talked for a while, but I actually don't think I'm going to cut very much out of it. It'll be one of the longer interviews that
Wow.
I've shared, but your story is so remarkable, and just what you've gone through and the way that you've processed it over time, and the humility to have encountered yourself with these like very profound realizations, and now to be literally doing the work that helped you. It's a very cool journey, and to be in this.
I have like a bit of tears in my eyes. I am so grateful that I get to do this with people, and it changes me still. Like being a therapist, we are changed in the work with people, and I am blown away by people's resilience and the way they figure it out. Like I told you, I work with a lot of individuals with DID, dissociative identity disorder, used to be called multiple personality. And I can really work well with it. And I think part of it is my 70 way of having a lot of different ideas at the same time. And ideas coming in and ideas leaving. And so in a lot of ways, some of these people have developed that in presence in their personality structure. And so like there'll be a part for a while that's going to get their needs met, or their social needs met, or their sexual needs met, right? And to me, it's just fascinating, this human experience. And I do joke around with my daughter. I'm like, I don't know what we are, but it sure does feel like maybe we did something pretty bad at some point. And now we have to deal with being in a human body. Like, I don't know, because it can be really hard.
Yeah.
And she laughs. She goes, what do you think? I'm like, I think we're the fallen angels. I'm thinking we're the ones that fell from grace, and this is what we do. And this is how we're trying to figure it back. We're trying to figure out how to get back to love. And something happened. And I don't know what it was, because it's weird. I mean, some of the stories I hear, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? He did what? I want to go and kill that guy, or that family system, and how fucked up they are for like eons, generations, that generational trauma. I mean, and so a part of it too, like sevens, like they do seem all frothy, but I think in some ways we do know darkness. Maybe that's why we have to fly, because it's too young, it's too much too young for some of us. And so, and I think it's been discussed a lot on your podcast and on the Enneagrammer, that there are sevens that commit suicide. And I mean,
right. Yeah.
I think that's part of it. It's like, you can't stay frothy and not deal with what's going on. Right? Because you will get swallowed up in the darkness. I have been there. I have been at the brink. I've had suicidality. I've had the darkness come in. And it's because it's like there's this disconnection from heart. There's this disconnection from body. And so thank God there's a path that I found.
I have one other question for you about, so you mentioned how, when you're really in yourself, you are really wise. And to your point about sevens and mental types in general can sometimes be really frothy, that's the monkey mind version of the mental center. That's actually the distortion of the mental center.
Yes.
Where it's just clutter, and it's like my analogy is like it's like your inner snow globe gets shook up and you're just distracted by all the little particles. But
Yes.
when the snow globe settles, then light can actually penetrate through, and there's this profound spaciousness and a clarity and a sense of genuine mental engagement with my experience that allows insights to arise freshly in the moment that are original and actually attuned.
Yeah.
And that is actually a superpower of seven and all the types in the mental center when they're really present with themselves. So I wonder what your experience of that is. Of yeah, how do you, or maybe another way to ask it is, how do you know when you're being wise versus when you're being cluttered, or
Oh, yeah.
like
It's a
genuine
felt
insight versus
sense.
real? Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a felt
Yeah.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like I'm working on this talk for this Sunday, and my process is very snow globe-esque
Okay.
because I love research and I go
Uh-huh.
off on tangents. I'm like, ooh, that's a cool idea. Ooh, that
Mm-hmm.
too. I'm going to note that one down. And so it's like if I had a desk in my mind, I'd have like books and pages and everything's kind of thrown about. And then I'm like, we're done. Take a deep breath. And then I put it down on paper. And then it feels clear. It feels like I'm now kind of spitting out all the things I just
Mm-hmm.
consumed.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes out in a way that always feels almost like another person is doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's self energy. It's like comes in, it's almost like I turn into a conduit. Instead of grasping, I'm now a conduit. And it
Right.
serves me every single time. So, like when I get up in front of people and talk, I used to get really scared about that. Now I just show up and I did my preparation. I know this stuff. This is in my wheelhouse. And then it just comes out. And then the, the feedback I get is like, wow, that was really clear. That was really like you really took all these things and you put
Mm-hmm.
them together in a way that was really digestible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And at times I don't even remember the talk. And I see it and I'm like
Wow.
almost like mesmerized. I watch
Yeah. Yeah.
myself on a video, I'm like, that's me.
Like a channeling or like
Wow.
a, yeah.
It feels like a channeling.
Yeah.
And that's why I know I'm in self. I think self is channeling.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. This
Mm,
is something that sevens don't get enough credit for, is how clear they can be,
yeah.
and how like penetrating and insightful and brilliant they can be. And um,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
think
no, it's cool to
especially
hear
with
you
that
talk about
sixth
it from the
wing,
right. Yeah.
well, especially
Yeah.
with that, you can really synthesize.
Uh huh.
I've heard
Uh
that
huh.
comment. People are like, you really synthesize things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, do I? Okay. It's like, and then I'm back to my, 70, like, really? What was that like? Oh, can we go get some lunch now? Like I'm
Yeah.
done. And it's
Right.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Uh huh.
it's interesting,
Right.
like even today, like
Yeah.
we got a bunch of friends coming over and this woman, she's in her 80s. She's really cool. She's going to be taking us through something called Zen Tangle. And I'm so excited to set the space, to create a beautiful environment for these ladies to just have a delightful time. I'm looking forward to these women. They're just really incredible. And it's like there's a little bit of monkey mind, but not much. And then I just get honed in. It's like I get honed into whatever that is, that
Mm-hmm.
being the
Mm-hmm.
hostess with the mostest or something. I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it feels clear. It feels self-led.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just creating this space
Yeah. Yeah.
for people to have a real enjoyment. So yeah.
What's this been like for you to have this conversation?
Well, I feel deeply listened to. Thank you for that. You're very good at listening and thoughtfully keeping the story going
Mm-hmm.
without ever feeling like I never felt like there was an agenda. And so I thank you for that. And
Mm-hmm.
it felt safe and I felt like, I don't know, I think from some of your words that my story might encourage people and might help maybe some of the more mental types know that we do have a path to get connected. and might look different from other people. For all the types, really. Like, there's a reason why we got specialized, and it served us. It got us through. And now, how is that working for you? You know,
Yeah.
like, we can expand it more, and we can actually, I think, fully live into the specialization. Like, the specialization can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Thank you for just, and I think I need to write a story. I think I need to write this all down. I've been having that sense for a long time, and this really encouraged me to maybe start to spend some time to really write my story in a concise, because there's actually a lot more to it, and I could really have a whole book. And
Yeah.
I feel encouraged that you, for whatever reason, your energy just encouraged me to maybe start to go down that path. So
Oh, cool.
thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just had the
Yeah.
thought, I was wondering maybe, because I heard you get lost in the novel you were writing and you couldn't figure out the ending.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
after that, you went on your whole therapy journey and became a therapist and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something there about yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
That sits well with me. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't know the ending of the story because I was right in the middle of my story, so I couldn't write it.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That poor little girl, she was stuck. She was stuck at 12. She had nowhere to go from there. Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
I also, just before we close too, I want to check in with the part of you that gave you permission for this and how she's feeling.
She wants to show you my my angel of death.
Great, let's do it. I'd love to see it.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, this is it. Are you seeing?
That's her. Yeah. Isn't she cool?
Wow, this is gorgeous. What is this?
Is that amazing?
Who made this? Or
so this is my young part that really, I was creating collages during the time I was getting typed.
Oh, okay.
And I got really into it. And I'm a Photoshopper, and I do a lot of that stuff. And I really sensed that I had to have some nightmares. Those are the 3 horses. They're nightmares. And they're nightmares. There's the owl in the back, the owl of wisdom, but also he's a predator. And then there's this really, there's this kick-ass angel, and she's the angel of death. And she is what my little part, who went through so much, she is now, she puts to death anything that doesn't serve the highest good. And so it just came to me, and she reminded, actually, I hadn't looked at this in a while. And when I was kind of talking to my little part yesterday, she goes, you got to show them the angel of death. And I'm like, oh, I will. And so I've done a whole kind of collage series. I haven't shared them with anybody, but I also have some, my sun sign, moon sign, and rising sign. I also have some other angels that I created collages with.
Is this, is this angel, just so I understand, another part, or is this what your little girl part grew up into? Or
yeah, this is what my little girl died. She goes, I died that day. And I'm like, you did.
Okay.
And she goes, and this is what I became.
Oh,
so this is kind of like
so
a
she
phoenix
became
rising up.
Right.
But I'm like, how did you die, and how do you want to be? What do you want to have happen? And she goes, I want to be burned into ashes, and I want you to spread my ashes over the ocean. And I was like, okay. And I did that. And then she goes, and I want you to create. I'd already created this. And she goes, and I want you to know that that's me. I'm the angel of death. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful. And the image.
Oh, I'm so glad I did, because she would have been pissed. I was supposed to share that, and she would have been like, you made me a promise.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, Josh, thank you.
Thank you, Kim, too.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you and talk more. And I love this. I love what you're doing.
You're welcome. And thanks for the kind words. I can't wait to watch this back. And it's so cool to hear just your story. Your story is incredibly inspiring, and to hear this journey from the mental center into the rest of you and back to self, given everything that you went through, it's really powerful. And I just really, I really respect you and the journey you've gone on, and I don't really have words for it. I just feel like a certain sense of resonance, and I just found this very beautiful. So thanks for sharing yourself.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling that energy. Thank you.
Well, okay. Yeah. So thank you very much. And we'll close here and we'll be in touch.
Okay. Thanks, Josh.
You're
You
welcome.
take care.
Thank you so much for joining me for my conversation with Kim Jozwiak. If you connect with Kim and you resonate with her story and you would like to connect with her as a therapist, then you can check her out on her website. I'll put a link in the show notes. She does therapy from the point of view of EMDR, internal family systems, equine therapy, and various modalities of mindfulness. If you're watching this on YouTube, then I would love for you to click the like button and the subscribe button. It's a zero cost and very effective way to help me out and my work and the Enneagram School. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, then I would super appreciate if you left a review. You can leave up to a 5-star review. Those are really helpful. There is a lot of really exciting stuff happening at the Enneagram School. John and Alexandra just wrapped their Pain of the Blind Spot seminar, and they are about to launch their Sexual Instinct class, which is starting on July 30th. You can check that out at the enneagramschool.com. I also invite you to subscribe to our email list, which is where we'll be announcing all of the future events that are happening. We have a new class that's about to be announced on dreams and the instinctual drives in the Enneagram, taught by Kristen and Kaisa from this Insomnia podcast. They're amazing and brilliant, and I am really excited to kind of reintroduce them to the community and to shine a spotlight on the work that they've done, which has been quite extraordinary, exploring the role of the unconscious and what dreams are showing us relative to our kind of instinctual blind spot, how dreams can help you process your unconscious material, particularly relating to your instincts and how they operate in your life. Their work is original and I think revolutionary, and I'm very, very excited to give them a platform to show it. If you would like to be interviewed on this podcast, if you think that you're a good candidate, then please reach out via the school. Preference goes to people who have been officially typed by the typing team at enneagrammer.com, who I think are the world's most expert typers. You can also check out their weekly classes where they type celebrities in real time and make very precise distinctions. And finally, if you know anybody who is a practitioner of an inner work modality and you think that they're really, really good and also very articulate about that modality, I would love to hear from you, and I'd love to potentially interview them. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to subscribe to the Enneagram School's email list where we will announce all future podcasts, workshops, classes, etc. All right, see you next time.